I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. The Magwood family was a kind, hardworking, and faithful household residing in Milan, Philippines. Cruz and Lovella, both teachers, had two well-behaved, intelligent children, an 18-year-old daughter named Crizzle Gwyn, and a 16-year-old son named Crizzle Louise. Gwyn and Louise enjoyed a serene childhood, growing up surrounded by the love and care of their parents. In 2021, Gwyn was studying medicine, while her younger brother, Louise, aspired to become a lawyer in the future. Although not wealthy, the Magwood family lived a comfortable and joyful life, their modest home always filled with laughter. In July 2021, the Magwood family welcomed a new member, a 17-year-old adopted daughter named Janice. Janice was an orphan with a troubled past. Little was known about Janice's background, but one thing was clear: she came from poverty. On September 26, 2013, a woman discovered an 8-year-old girl wandering at a train station. This girl was Janice Siebel. She claimed to have no parents and could not remember anything about her life prior to that moment. The woman who found Janice was utterly astonished and immediately posted pictures of the girl online. It was unclear whether Janice was lost or abandoned, but despite the woman's efforts to spread the word across numerous forums, tragically, no one came forward to claim the child. Ultimately, Janice was placed in an orphanage. As time slipped by, Janice grew up and started working as a domestic helper from one house to another to make ends meet. In 2020, a couple with two young children hired Janice as their nanny. This couple was related to the Magwood family. At a family gathering, Janice met Gwyn for the first time. The two girls instantly became close friends. Janice, Gwyn, and Louise often posted dance videos together on TikTok, sharing hours of conversation without ever growing weary of each other. Then, curious, Gwyn and Louise asked Janice why she was not in school, but instead working. Janice sadly revealed that as an orphan she had no family and had been forced to endure hard labor day and night to survive. She had to wash, cook, clean, and was deprived of education. Janice's future was, and she had no idea what lay ahead in her life. Gwyn hugged Janice tightly, feeling immense sympathy for her friend. An idea began to form in Gwyn's mind. After discussing it with Louise, the siblings persuaded their parents to consider adopting Janice. Initially, the Magwoods were hesitant. Their home had no spare bedrooms, and their modest teacher salaries were barely enough for their own family. But Gwyn and Louise persisted daily. Gwyn proposed to find a part-time job to help out, while Louise offered to sleep on the living room couch to free up his bedroom for Janice. Finally, the Magwoods were moved, believing perhaps this was God's will. We'll just try a little harder. Things will work out, they thought, unaware of what the future held. In July 2021, the Magwoods officially adopted Janice. They enrolled her in the school where they taught, and Janice changed her name to Janice Magwood. Then, the peaceful life of the Magwood family was suddenly disrupted. One day, approximately $200, stored in an old cash box in Mr. and Mrs. Magwood's bedroom, mysteriously vanished. Initially, Janice suggested that a thief might have reached in through the window to take the money, but everyone in the house found this explanation peculiar. They had never experienced such a bizarre theft before. Why would the thief only take the money from the box? Why were there no signs of a break-in or disturbance? Everyone was puzzled, yet no one suspected anything until Gwyn discovered a secret compartment that had been sewn back into Janice's backpack, containing the exact amount of stolen money. Janice quickly confessed, admitting she didn't know why she had done it, possibly due to the trauma and constant fear of scarcity she had experienced since childhood, leading her to steal the money. Janice wept and sincerely apologized. Though heartbroken, the Magwoods understood and empathized with Janice. Gwyn and Louise not only defended Janice in front of their parents, but also reassured her that they would do everything in their power to help heal her emotional wounds. The family of 5 spent time together, attending church on weekends. They treated Janice as one of their own, and took extra care to ensure she never felt out of place or abandoned. Janice's life seemed to have turned a new page. For the first time, she knew what it felt like to wake up without fear of losing her job or wandering the streets. The Magwood family had given her an education, a home, a family, and a future. However, tragically, this was still not enough for Janice. On December 10th, 2021, Cruz and Lavella made breakfast for their children and then went to work. Cruz was a teacher, while Lavella was principal of the school. That morning was the first time Janice called them mom and dad, marking an important milestone for both the adoptive parents and the child. The Magwoods left the house joyfully, unaware that the day, which started off wonderfully, would end as the darkest, most terrible day of their lives. At 3 p.m. that day, Janice's Facebook account began posting a series of alarming status updates. She claimed someone was breaking into the house, and that she was hiding underneath the bed, which used to be Louise's but now was hers. Janice begged someone to call the police. A colleague of Cruz saw these updates and hurriedly informed him. Cruz, who was fixing a classroom at the time, received the devastating news. He rushed home, his heart aflame with panic, but he could never have anticipated the horrific scene that awaited him. Cruz arrived home around 3:15 p.m. to a chilling silence. Approaching the main door, he spotted a blood-soaked blanket and a bloodied knife lying in front of the door. With a sinking heart, Cruz shouted for each of his children, but there was no response. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. He then moved to the back of the house, continuously calling out for his children. Cruz said, "I pushed the front door, but it was locked." I called for Bye Boy, Louis' nickname at home, grinned Janice. The house remained eerily quiet. Cruz went around to the back and entered through the kitchen door. As he walked into the living room, he discovered the bodies of his children lying in pools of blood scattered with broken glass, a hammer, and a baseball bat. The stench of blood filled the air. Gwen's body was covered in bruises and stab wounds, her body stiff and already attracting ants. Meanwhile, Louise was found tied up and gagged near the front door, his body also drenched in blood. Mr. Maggard, stricken with madness, wailed and clutched the bodies of his children. At that moment, Janice appeared, drenched not in blood, but in water. Cruz Maggard hurried over to ask if Janice was hurt anywhere. He quickly realized Janice did not have a single scratch. Janice explained that she was taking a bath, so she did not hear him calling. She also recounted that 3 men had broken into the house and attacked the 3 siblings. She managed to run to her bedroom, lock the door, and hide under the bed. Janice explained that she took a bath after the attackers had left to calm down. Immediately after, Cruz called Lavella to inform her that their children were no more. Lavella screamed in agony, her legs gave way, and she felt as if her heart had been ripped out of her chest. Lavella blamed herself for not being at home to protect her children. If she had been there, perhaps her children would still be alive. The autopsy revealed Gwen suffered 21 stab wounds, while Louise endured 51 cuts. They had been strangled and beaten with a hammer and baseball bat. Clearly, whoever the murderer was, it seemed they had unleashed their rage and hatred upon the 2 children. In the house, nothing was taken except for Gwen's mobile phone. This further suggested that the murders were motivated by personal reasons rather than robbery. Gwen and Louise were laid to rest on December 20th, 2021. Over 1,000 people attended to pay their respects. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation. Nothing of value was stolen from the house. All the weapons used in the murders were household items. The hammer belonged to Cruz and was stored in a location known only to Janice and Gwen. The baseball bat was Louise's and had been kept in Louise's old room, which was now Janice's bedroom. This meant that at some point, the murderer had to have entered Janice's room, where she claimed to be hiding to retrieve the baseball bat. Despite their reluctance to suspect their adopted daughter Janice, the more Mr. and Mrs. Magwad thought about it, the more they found Janice's story to be riddled with inconsistencies. Why would the murderers leave Janice unscathed while brutally attacking and killing Gwen and Louise? When Cruz Magwad arrived home at 3:15 p.m., only 15 minutes after Janice posted her plea for help, yet the bodies of Gwen and Louise were already stiff, and ants had started to swarm over them. The autopsy results showed Gwen and Louise had been killed around 2 p.m. that day. So why did Janice wait so long before seeking help? Why did she have her phone in hand, but chose to post on Facebook instead of calling the police directly? And how could she take a bath after witnessing such a horrific crime? Somehow, Janice also had the time to change her Facebook name from Janice Magwad to JP just before posting her plea for help. Additionally, Janice claimed she had locked her door and hid under the bed, yet the room was in disarray and there were bloodstains scattered across the floor. If the room had been locked from the beginning, how did the attackers get inside to take the baseball bat? Clearly, there were too many holes in her story. Investigators conducted a thorough search of the house and found an ID card belonging to a 17-year-old young man named Kanedo in Janice's bedroom. Mr. and Mrs. Magwad did not recognize him, but a witness claimed that Kanedo was a local youth who worked at a nearby church. Police also discovered a plastic bag in a stream close to the house, apparently discarded by the killers in hopes it would be carried away. Instead, it got caught on a branch. Inside was a set of Janice's blood-soaked clothes. However, the most shocking evidence was found on the baseball bat used to kill Louise and Gwyn, Janice's fingerprints. After hours of interrogation, Janice broke down and confessed. She admitted to orchestrating the murders of Gwyn and Louise, the very people who had pleaded with their parents to adopt her. She did not act alone. Janice revealed that Kanedo, the 17-year-old church worker who had feelings for her, assisted her in carrying out the brutal plan. She had manipulated Kanedo into helping her. Facebook messages between Janice and Kanedo showed they had been planning the murders for 10 days. In these messages, Janice expressed her extreme hatred for Gwyn and requested Kanedo's help in killing her. Janice told investigators she killed Gwyn out of jealousy, feeling that Mr. and Mrs. Magwad loved Gwyn more than her. However, Janice never explained why she also killed Louise. Many believe Janice wanted to all the Magwad children to become the sole recipient of their parents' attention and love. Around 2 p.m. on October 10th, Janice unlocked the door to let Kanedo sneak into the house. After Kanedo attacked, Gwyn ran outside, but then returned to save her brother and Janice, unaware that Janice was the actual monster. Janice admitted to personally killing Gwyn. As she was stabbed, Gwyn screamed, "This is just a dream. This is just a dream. I will still become a doctor. I don't know what I did wrong to you, Janice. I love you." After murdering Gwyn and Louise, Janice and Kanedo showered, changed clothes, and placed their bloodied clothes in a plastic bag to dispose of them in the stream. Then, Janice fabricated a cry for help by posting the dark plea on Facebook. It only took 6 days for the authorities to close the case when they arrested Kanedo. They also found Gwyn's mobile phone. Janice was promptly arrested, and both were sent to a juvenile detention facility. Janice was known to enjoy horror movies, specifically one about a family that adopts a child who turns out to be a serial killer. Many believe Janice might have drawn inspiration from this film. In a final twist, it turned out that Janice was not an orphan. Throughout her time with the Magwood family, she maintained contact with her biological parents. Janice is the daughter of Michelle Sebiel and Juanito Sebiel, who had been separated for many years. Janice also has 3 other siblings. On December 29, 2021, Michelle and one of her daughters visited Cruz in La Vela. Michelle knelt down to apologize on behalf of her daughter, but Mr. and Mrs. Magwood warmly embraced her, asserting that it was not her fault. They harbored no resentment towards her, nor did they blame her for what had happened. Initially, La Vela wanted to forgive Janice because of her devout faith. She felt that Janice was a poverty and lack of education, and must have suffered severe trauma in her childhood. However, her opinion changed when she saw Janice in court. Janice's eyes were cold, empty. Despite the horrific actions she had committed, she showed no remorse, felt no guilt, and never once apologized for her deeds. It was insane and horrifying that a 16-year-old girl adopted by a loving and kind family could commit such brutal murders. They treated her as their own flesh and blood, gave her everything, but in return, she took everything from them. In May 2022, Janice was sentenced to 31 years in prison, while Kanedo received a 29-year sentence. The Magwoods expressed their gratitude for the community's support after the darkest day of their lives. In August 2022, they opened a restaurant in memory of Gwyn and Louise. The menu featured the favorite dishes of their 2 children. Despite all they had endured, Mr. and Mrs. Magwood still possessed the strength and love to show kindness to everyone they met. They found solace in believing that they had raised 2 wonderful children, kind and full of love, even though their lives were tragically cut short. May the souls of Gwyn and Louise rest in peace, and may the broken and grieving hearts of Mr. and Mrs. Magwood find healing. Story 2. Lindsay Hawker was born on 30th of October, 1984 in the United Kingdom. She was the middle child in a family blessed with 3 daughters. The Hawkers were a well-to-do, close-knit, and joyful family. Lindsay's parents were Bill and Julia. Her older sister was Louise, and the younger one was Lisa. From a young age, Lindsay had always been a kind-hearted, hard-working girl, always ready to lend a helping hand to others. In 2006, she excelled in her studies and graduated as the top student in biology from the University of Leeds. Life seemed incredibly bright and promising for Lindsay. Lindsay is an independent and adventurous young woman. Thus, she wishes to spend several years of her youth experiencing life in various countries around the world before settling down to family life and stability. Consequently, after graduating from university, Lindsay has decided to move to Japan to teach English. Her boyfriend Ryan also plans to join her there a year later. A year on, Lindsay easily secured a position at Koiwa School in Tokyo, one of the biggest private schools in Japan. It appeared that Lindsay quickly adapted to her new life. She lived with two female colleagues, also teachers at the school. Daily, she would cycle to the train station, catch the train to work, and return in the same manner. Lindsay regularly stayed in touch with her family back in the UK, sharing with them daily snapshots of her life and the Japanese culture. She was evidently very happy and content with her new life there. However, Lindsay's happiness was tragically short-lived. On the morning of March 25, 2007, Lindsay said goodbye to her roommates and left the house with her teaching materials and bag. But she never returned. On the afternoon of March 26th, Lindsay's parents received a distressing call from school staff reporting Lindsay hadn't shown up for work for 2 consecutive days. It turned out her roommates had already contacted the police the previous night when Lindsay failed to return home. But for some unspecified reason, an investigation had not yet been initiated. The news sent the Hawker family into a state of panic. Lindsay's father hastily booked the earliest flight to Tokyo and got in touch with Ryan, Lindsay's boyfriend. Shocked by the news, Ryan was immediately reminded of the story Lindsay had shared with him 6 days earlier, on March 20th, 2007. That day, as Lindsay was heading home by train, an unfamiliar man approached her, claiming to be one of her students. However, Lindsay, who remembered her students well, was sure this man was not one of them. Nevertheless, she courteously greeted him and looked away. For some reason, the man made her feel uneasy. She got off the train and cycled home as usual, but upon nearing her house, she accidentally looked back and realized the man was right behind her. The man caught up and explained he was planning to study abroad and wished to improve his English, asking if Lindsay could provide some private tutoring sessions. Despite feeling unnerved, Lindsay tried to stay calm, thinking maybe she was overreacting and perhaps he was merely a student seeking extra English lessons. By the time they reached Lindsay's apartment, the man claimed he was extremely thirsty and asked if he could come in for a drink of water and discuss the tutoring schedule. Lindsay hesitated, but knowing her roommates were home, she invited him in. After briefly greeting Lindsay's roommates, the man sat down with Lindsay in the living room. She agreed to teach him English at a cafe, considering it a safe public place for their sessions. While conversing, the man sketched a portrait of Lindsay and wrote down his name, phone number, and email address. This man was Tatsuya Ichihashi. Their first English lesson was scheduled for the 25th of March, 2007 at a cafe near the train station. The previous day, Lindsay had messaged her boyfriend back in the UK, telling him not to worry about the man who had followed her home, describing him merely as an oddball. They were to meet in a cafe, so she reassured him everything would be fine. Tragically, Lindsay was terribly mistaken. After receiving information, the police reviewed the cafe's security footage and easily spotted Lindsay accompanying Ichihashi into the establishment. Lindsay appeared anxious and fidgety, continually touching her hair. The two were observed studying together for about 50 minutes, during which Ichihashi seemed to be rummaging through various bags without finding what he was looking for. Around 10 a.m., they left and jointly hailed a taxi. By this time, the police had determined that Ichihashi was the last person seen with Lindsay. At 8 p.m. on March 26th, 9 officers arrived at Ichihashi's apartment. Splitting into 2 groups, one remained on the ground floor, while the other ascended to his 4th floor unit. However, upon opening the door, Ichihashi, to the police's astonishment, bolted from his apartment and slipped through their cordon. Barefoot and carrying a backpack, he sped down the emergency exit, eluding the officers. His swift escape meant that those on the 4th floor couldn't alert their colleagues below in time, allowing him to once again evade the waiting police by sprinting through the winding streets. Upon examining Ichihashi's apartment, the scene was chaotic, with women's belongings scattered throughout. A purse belonging to Lindsay was discovered in a corner, but that was not the worst of it. Stepping onto the balcony, the police uncovered a horrific sight. Ichihashi had moved a bathtub outside, filled with soil and sand, from which a small, pale hand protruded. It was Lindsay Hawker's corpse. Her naked body was removed from the bathtub, her mouth gagged with a scarf, and her limbs tightly bound with garden twine. Severe bruises covered her body, evidence of a prolonged savage attack. A large, egg-sized bruise on her left cheek indicated repeated punches to the face, while other injuries suggested she had been kicked and fallen against furniture. Lindsay had been strangled to such an extent that her neck cartilage was crushed, her head was shaved, and her hair was found in a plastic bag. At 3 a.m. on March 27th, Lindsay's parents received the most dreadful news imaginable. Their daughter's body had been found. The police then looked into Ichihashi's background. A 28-year-old living alone in a 3-bedroom apartment in Yukuba. On the outskirts of Tokyo, his affluent parents, a dentist mother and a surgeon father, had purchased the apartment for him. Despite their success, Ichihashi was a disappointment, never securing a stable job and still dependent on his parents' monthly allowance at 28. He lived in solitude with a penchant for violent manga and had previous arrests for stalking and assaulting women. At the time of the incident, Ichihashi had a long-distance girlfriend, meeting her only a few times a month. He was also rumored to have a fitness addiction, regularly attending the gym and jogging, which could explain his ability to pursue Lindsay on her bicycle home on March 20th. After their session on March 25th, Ichihashi pretended to have left his money at home, convincing Lindsay to share a taxi back to his place to retrieve it. Lindsay told the taxi driver to wait a few minutes, while she accompanied Ichihashi to get the money. However, she did not return after 7 minutes, prompting the driver to leave. Wanted posters featuring Ichihashi's image flooded Tokyo. The murder news was broadcasted nationwide and internationally, with police urging the public to provide any information, no matter how insignificant, to apprehend the dangerous criminal. The investigation followed leads to red light districts, hostels and hotels, yet led nowhere. Months passed, and Ichihashi seemed to vanish into thin air. Meanwhile, fan clubs glorifying the twisted murderer emerged online, praising Ichihashi as a hero, an outlaw challenging the police, and even labeling him as Japan's most handsome criminal. Yet, unbeknownst to many, his familiar face was gone. Living incognito in Ibaraki, northwest of Tokyo, Ichihashi altered his appearance as his face plastered wanted posters everywhere. He frequently changed residences and disguised himself with glasses, fake hair, and a mask. Yet knowing this was insufficient, he took a drastic and bizarre step, performing surgery on his own face. Ichihashi purchased a first aid kit and removed a large mole on his left cheek before using scissors to trim and reduce his lower lip. Unable to complete this self-surgery in one go due to the pain, he did not abandon his plan. A few days later, he completed the self-operation in a public bathroom. He also attempted to narrow his nose using needle and thread, but found the procedure more challenging than modifying his lips. Realizing he needed professional help, he planned to undergo a legitimate cosmetic surgery, but this required funds. Using the name, age, and address of a deceased man, he secured a job as a construction laborer in Osaka. Though Ichihashi's co-workers found him odd, they never suspected anything. While police were searching everywhere, Ichihashi worked steadily at the construction company for 13 months, saving approximately 1 million yen. Eventually, he had enough money for a nose job, aiming for a longer and higher nose. The surgery was successful, yet Ichihashi remained unsatisfied, desiring a complete facial reconstruction. 2 years after the incident, on October 24, 2009, Ichihashi visited a cosmetic clinic in Nagoya for lip surgery and eyelid correction. While completing the paperwork, the clinic staff noticed a large sarara on his cheek from where he had removed the mold. Suspicion arose when Ichihashi agreed to have his photo taken for before and after comparisons. The clinic staff recognized him as the national fugitive and immediately contacted the police. However, sensing their suspicion, Ichihashi abruptly quit his job and fled to Okinawa. This time, the police apprehended him at the ferry terminal. Realizing there was no escape, Ichihashi surrendered to the authorities. Ichihashi quickly confessed, revealing he had first seen Lindsay on the train and had secretly followed her for months before deciding to approach her on March 20th. After deceiving Lindsay to visit his apartment to retrieve tuition fees, he dragged her inside and raped her. Despite Lindsay's fierce resistance, she could not escape a tragic and painful fate. On July 11, 2011, Ichihashi was sentenced to life imprisonment. While incarcerated, he wrote a book titled Until I Was Arrested, detailing the 2 years he spent evading the police and the extremes he went to in order to alter his appearance. The book sold over 100,000 copies, and Ichihashi expressed a wish to donate the proceeds to Lindsay's family, but they declined. The Hawker family stated they were grateful that the case was closed and justice served, that Lindsay was gone forever. After such loss and pain, all that remained was a hope for Lindsay's soul to find peace. Story 3. Over 2 years have passed since the tragic and mysterious death of a beautiful and talented Filipino flight attendant found deceased in a hotel bathtub following a New Year's Eve party with friends. This perplexing case has captured the attention of both local and international media, sparking widespread speculation about the circumstances of her demise. It remains uncertain whether her death was a mere accident or the result of an assault that night in room 2209 of the hotel. Now, we delve deeper into the enigmatic demise of Christine DeSera. Born on April 13, 1997, Christine DeSera was a Philippine flight attendant working for PAL Express. The second of 4 siblings, she graduated with honors in mass communication from the University of the Philippines, Mindanao in Davao City. Despite her family residing in General Santos, Christine relocated to Manila for her career. Renowned for her beauty and talent, Christine had won several national beauty contests in 2019 and had moved to Manila to work with the Philippine airline. Her friends and colleagues describe her as a jovial and amiable individual in her personal life, yet serious and professional at work. On December 31st, 2020, Christine opted to celebrate the new year with a close group of friends instead of returning home. She had a strong bond with a group of 5 from the LGBT community, with whom she frequently partied and socialized. This New Year celebration was no exception. The group, consisting of Rommel, Clark, Valentine, Geigo, and John, booked room 2209 at the City Garden Grand Hotel in Makati for their festivities. John was the first to check in on the morning of December 31st, followed by Christine at noon, with the others joining later. Rommel invited 5 additional friends, all males from the LGBT community, named Ray, Lewis, Mark, Jamia, and Edward. Meanwhile, a separate group of 13 rented the adjacent room 2207, with some acquaintances common to both parties. Around 10 p.m., their celebration commenced. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic and restrictions against gatherings, Christine and her friends indulged in alcoholic beverages like tequila and rum mixed with Coke, seemingly exempted from rules due to their connection with John Halley, the hotel manager who facilitated the event. At around 1:45 a.m., after finishing his shift, John joined the party. Surveillance footage from the 22nd floor corridor at 11:21 p.m. shows Christine and her group leaving their room and heading towards room 2207. By 11:38 p.m., Christine and her friends returned to their own room. Christine appeared to be in high spirits, carrying her shoes and holding a drink. Valentine later mentioned they went to room 2207 because they had mutual friends there. They engaged in a game of hip-hop hooray, with Christine emerging as the winner. After returning to room 2209, they started taking photos and videos to post on social media. At 12:30 a.m., Christine called her family to wish them a happy new year and spoke with her mother for a while. At 2:50 a.m., Valentine and Christine visited room 2207 again, while a hotel employee delivered a mattress to room 2209. Just 2 minutes later, at 2:52 a.m., both Christine and Valentine returned to their room. Christine, appearing intoxicated, initiated a kiss with Valentine. Between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., Christine made several trips back and forth to room 2207, but never stayed for long. Approximately every 10 minutes, one of Christine's friends from room 2209 would come over to bring her back. At 4:13 a.m., John visited room 2207 once again to bring Christine back, this time carrying her. Although intoxicated, Christine seemed coherent enough to unlock the door to their room. At 4:39 a.m., Valentine and Christine went back to room 2207. They returned to their room at 4:52 a.m., appearing to be in good spirits. At 5:05 a.m., Rommel went to room 2207 to bring Christine back, and they appeared to be playfully joking around. At 6:23 a.m., the last sighting of Christine was captured as Valentine carried her back into their room, with Christine being the one to open the door. At 7:23 a.m., some individuals from room 2207 started to leave the hotel. By 9 o'clock a.m., some friends from room 2209 began to depart as well. At 10 o'clock a.m., Rommel woke up to use the bathroom and found Christine lying in the bathtub. He tried to wake her, suggesting she should lie down on the bed for comfort. Christine was still breathing, but had her eyes tightly shut. Rommel thought she seemed exhausted, but was indicating with her hand for him to let her sleep. At least he believed so. Rommel noted that her hand was resting on her stomach. He then provided Christine with a blanket and pillow, before returning to bed himself. By noon, Rommel went to the bathroom to wake Christine as they needed to check out soon. That's when he realized her lips had turned blue, and she was no longer breathing. Panic-stricken, Rommel called for the others. At this point, only 5 people remained in the hotel: Gygo, John, Rommel, Valentine, and Clark. They immediately pulled Christine out of the bathtub and attempted CPR. Gygo called for hotel staff and an ambulance. They were all terrified and frantic. Hotel staff arrived quickly to check and brought a wheelchair, which was too small and lacked footrests, making it difficult to place Christine, whose body had stiffened, onto it. Christine was taken to the hotel's clinic, but the doctor there could not revive her. They hurriedly transported Christine to Makati City Hospital, but it was too late. By 5 p.m., the hospital declared Christine deceased. The following day, January 2nd, 2021, Christine's body was transferred to Rizal Funeral Homes in Pasay City at 9 a.m. for an autopsy. The post-mortem examination concluded that the cause of death was an aneurysm caused by a ruptured aorta. But according to the autopsy report, there were no traces of drugs or stimulants in Christine's system. However, 150 milliliters of a black liquid was found in her stomach. The autopsy results also indicated no semen traces were found on Christine's body, and her underwear contained only her DNA. The examination of her genital area revealed a tear in the hymen, which was old and nearly healed, indicating it was not a recent injury. The forensic report also noted multiple bruises on her right arm, right thigh, right ankle, and foot, and a fresh scratch on her left thigh. Notably, there were acupuncture marks on Christine's right hand. January 4th, 2021, the Philippine police announced to the media that they had solved the case, declaring it a gang rape and claiming semen traces were found on Christine's body. This statement caused public confusion as it directly contradicted the forensic report released the previous day, which utterly concluded there were no signs of rape. Despite this, the chief of the PNP announced the arrest of 3 men suspected of raping and killing Christina: John Dela Sera, Rommel Deluro, and John Halley. However, everyone present at the hotel that night, especially Christine's close friends in room 2209, asserted their innocence, highlighting that they were all gay and had no sexual interest in women. They had known Christine for a long time and regarded her purely as a friend. Nonetheless, the police colonel believed the suspects could have sexually assaulted Christine and declared that, regardless of their sexual orientation, men will be men, especially when intoxicated. This statement by the police sparked a divide in public opinion, with some believing the police's words and condemning Christine's gay friends, while others criticized the police for their sloppy and unprofessional work. The forensic report and investigation results were at odds, leading to widespread suspicion that the police had prematurely closed the case. Others blamed Christine, arguing that she dressed too provocatively and drank excessively without knowing how to protect herself. On January 4th, hashtags like Justice for Christine, Stop Blaming the Victim, and Protect Intoxicated Girls flooded social media. The Philippine police faced public backlash for embalming Christine's body before conducting the autopsy, which could significantly affect the accuracy of toxicological studies. Major Michael admitted embalming Christine without her family's consent, citing compliance with new regulations introduced post-COVID pandemic. Christine's family did not accept her death as a result of natural causes and requested another autopsy. Christine's mother sued the police for their negligence and unprofessionalism, believing the bruises on Christine's limbs were evidence of rape. However, Christine's friends explained that she had been excessively drinking that night, staggering and vomiting from 3:30 a.m. to 7 a.m. She vomited multiple times in the toilet and had been kneeling on the floor for a long time, which could explain the knee bruises. They said Christine was so intoxicated, she could not change her clothes and vomited all over herself and her hair. They cleaned up the vomit in the bathtub and covered her with a jacket. Since Christine continued to feel nauseous, she chose to stay in the bathtub instead of soiling the bed. They suggested the thigh bruise could have occurred as she clumsily climbed into the bathtub, and the scratch on her thigh was from trying to place her on a trolley. But her body was stiff, causing her thigh to scrape against the trolley handle. However, Christine's mother did not believe these explanations. She argued that her daughter was young and healthy, especially since Christine worked for an airline and was regularly medically examined. She also pointed to a video showing Christine kissing Valentine before entering the room, suggesting it may have triggered dark intentions in the men. Meanwhile, Valentine insisted that Christine initiated the kiss, and it was merely a drunken moment. In another video, John is seen carrying Christine back to the room. In an interview, John explained they had to go to room 2207 numerous times to bring Christine back because she was too drunk and started vomiting there. He said Christine suddenly became weak and couldn't stand, so he had to carry her. Christine's friends affirmed they only wanted to help her and had no intention of raping her. They also believed Christine was not raped by the men from room 2207, as she never stayed there alone for more than 10 minutes, and she was normal when they brought her back. If Christine had been raped in room 2207, she surely would have told them. On January 5th, the Philippine National Investigation Bureau took over the case and conducted a second autopsy on Christine's body. Tissue samples were collected, and an attempt was made to extract fluid from her organs to determine whether she had been sexually assaulted. On January 6th, 3 of Christine's friends were released after the National Investigation Bureau ruled out homicide as the cause of Christine's death. After 2 autopsies, experts concluded that she died from a ruptured aorta. Christine had suffered cardiopulmonary arrest leading to the rupture. A medical report on January 11th also indicated that Christine's heart weighed 500 grams, whereas a normal heart weighs around 300 grams. This discovery suggests Christine had long-standing undiagnosed hypertension, which caused her heart to enlarge. Aortic aneurysms are typically associated with older individuals and arise from arteriosclerosis, but can also occur in younger people due to complications from other diseases. In Christine's case, increased blood pressure in the aorta led to its weakening and subsequent rupture. Hypertension can lead to various symptoms such as fatigue, nausea, and excessive sweating. It's possible that Christine and her friends mistook these symptoms for the effects of excessive drinking and a hangover, delaying urgent medical care. On April 27th, the police cleared the 11 men who were at the hotel with Christine that night of rape charges. Despite the Dacre family's disbelief in the forensic results and multiple lawsuits filed, the police lacked sufficient evidence to charge her friends. Over a week after her death, Christine was returned to her hometown and laid to rest at Forest Lake Memorial Park in General Santos City. More than a year after Christine's passing, her friends appeared in a television interview. They shared how their lives were completely overturned since that tragic night. Even though the charges were dropped, they struggled to find new employment. They were relentlessly attacked and vilified online. Among them, Geigo suffered the most, having to sell his late mother's assets and suffering from chronic depression. Despite the tarnishing of their reputations and careers over a crime they did not commit, the group expressed their determination to start over and move forward through the storm. The anguish endured by Christine's family is unimaginable, and it seems they cannot come to terms with the circumstances of her passing. Life is fragile and unpredictable. May we always cherish each moment with our loved ones. Story 4. Jen Eyre and Mark Gerardo appeared to have it all in the serene suburbs of Delaware County, Pennsylvania. They enjoyed successful careers, a strong social network, and seemingly lived the quintessential American dream. Jen Eyre, a talented and ambitious woman, and Mark, respected in his profession, seemed like the perfect couple. However, beneath the surface of their idyllic lives simmered a cauldron of hidden challenges that would ultimately unravel their relationship. What began as a story of love and success took a dark turn, spiraling into one of betrayal and sorrow that shattered the tranquility of their suburban existence. Jen Eyre Gerardo, formerly known as Jen Eyre Cox, was born on December 19, 1970, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. She grew up there and graduated from Bishop Lewis High School, where she excelled in advanced courses. She then studied communication at Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis, and was involved in the college's theater arts and performances program. Jen Eyre continued her education at Butler University, earning a BA in communication and theater arts. She worked in various marketing positions for different companies in Indiana, including in Carmel and Indianapolis. For several years, she was the marketing manager at Circor Instrumentation. Jen Eyre Cox and Marty Gerardo first met as teenagers in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in the summer of 1986. Jen Eyre worked at Taco Bell, and her stunning blue eyes and big smile immediately drew Mark's attention. He felt speechless and a bit nervous around her. It wasn't until 4 years later that their romance started to blossom. They reconnected when Mark found out Jen Eyre was working at a nearby mall. He visited her often, and one day, Jen Eyre asked him outright when he was going to take her out. Mark confessed that he was shy, which she appreciated. Jen Eyre's confidence and straightforwardness were a stark contrast to Mark's reserved nature. Melissa Murphy, Jen Eyre's childhood friend, remembered how excited Jen Eyre was when she first met Mark, describing him as the one. Jen Eyre was ready to do anything for him. On October 23, 1993, Mark and Jen Eyre got married. Mark was 25, and Jen Eyre was 23 at the time. Their relationship had begun in their youth and carried them into a loving marriage. Mark talked about how happy he and his partner Jen Eyre were, and how he couldn't picture his life without her. Like any relationship, they went through tough times in their marriage. Mark said their arguments could be intense, and Jen Eyre usually won because she always had the final say. One of Mark's high school friends, Mike Hartman, said he didn't know all the details of their relationship, but he knew their emotions ran high. The couple had a strong marriage, but the 2008 financial crisis hit them hard. Money had always been a source of stress, causing many arguments. Mark later said that the crisis changed everything for them. In November 2011, they both moved to Greenville, South Carolina, where they found new jobs in marketing. With the new environment and frequent exploration of the state's beautiful mountains and beaches, Mark said they experienced a little bit of restoration for their marriage, which had brought them much closer than before. Everything was going well for the next few years until 2017, when their renewed life in South Carolina came to a halt. Jen Eyre faced job layoffs and struggled to secure a new position. She lost confidence in herself and became much less strong than the woman she had once been. Around this time, the couple decided once again that it was time to search for new opportunities and a new beginning elsewhere. Finally, the couple decided that Delaware would be their new home, and immediately, Mark began his search for a job opportunity. He saw that the University of Delaware was hiring a creative director in its marketing department. If he is successful, he will be the supervisor. He sent an email applying for the role and received an instant message back from a woman 15 years his junior, who would be his new boss, offering him an interview. His concerns that a woman 15 years his junior would be managing him subsided almost immediately. This marked the beginning of Mark Gerardo's first encounter with Meredith Chapman. Meredith Chapman was a Pennsylvania native and 33 years old at the time. She was a graduate of the University of Delaware with a bachelor's degree in communication and a master's degree in education. Meredith was also married to a man named Luke, a former New York City councilman. The couple had married in 2009 and lived in Fairfield Crest, Delaware, with their dog, Indy. When Mark attended his interview, he found that he was immediately attracted to Meredith, not only to her beauty, but also to her pure brilliance. He said, "When I sat across the desk from her, within 5 minutes, I didn't say it out loud, but I said, I've got to work for this person." He further said she was so articulate, energetic, and passionate about the job, and she was accomplished at her age to be in the position she was in. "I was dumbfounded," he added. It appeared that Meredith was impressed with Mark because she immediately offered him the job, which Mark gratefully accepted. He moved to Wilmington, Delaware, in November 2017, while his wife stayed behind in South Carolina temporarily to lease their home. Mark was excited, not only because of the move north, but also because of the growth in his career, not knowing that this would be the beginning of the end of his marriage with Jen Eyre. Mark lived alone in Delaware for the first 45 days, while his wife stayed behind to arrange the rental of their home. During that time, Mark said he got to know Meredith well, and stated that the two had a lot in common. One day, she asked him out for a drink. Remembering the events of the night, Mark said it was easy to talk to Meredith. Before they went home, he spoke to her about his marriage to Jen Eyre, even though it wasn't necessarily in a negative way. He also told Meredith about losing his parents and his brother. Mark didn't know what was transpiring, stating, he went on to say, "I knew it felt amazing to be around Meredith, and I was confused by the feelings I was having, to be honest, until it became a little bit more forward with the dinner that we had. It felt more like a date. When he was with Meredith, Mark said the issues with his marriage also came into focus. It was during this time that Mark started comparing Meredith to his wife, stating how Meredith began to tell him that he was good at what he did, and how wonderful a man he was, something he said he had never heard from his wife's lips. Mark was hopelessly in love, stating, "That just made an impression on me. Here's this woman, whom I think is amazing, saying that she thinks I'm a wonderful man." 1 month after meeting Meredith, Mark said that the two kissed for the first time. He further said that while the energy was there, he immediately felt awful for betraying his wife, and told Meredith that whatever was about to happen couldn't be because he cared for his wife. Nonetheless, he soon realized that he also couldn't give up on the feelings he was developing for Meredith, who, he said, had told him she was 9 years into an unhappy marriage herself. Mark said, "I felt enthralled. It was such a connection. To shut it down just didn't feel right. I had to at least find out what it was that drew us together." Before Jen Eyre had joined her husband in Delaware, her husband and Meredith had already expressed their love for each other, with Mark saying, "It felt right to tell Meredith that I loved her, and it was a very powerful feeling." In December 2017, Jen Eyre moved north, and Mark said she could sense he was distant. It wasn't long before she confronted him about her feeling that there could be another woman. Mark said, "She finally asked me, 'What is up with you? You're acting differently.'" He continued, "She said specifically, 'It's Meredith, isn't it?'" This was after Mark had mentioned Meredith several times when speaking about his new job. Although her husband denied the affair at first, Jen Eyre would not let it go. She continued to question his relationship with Meredith, aware that there was something between the two. Jen Eyre began to pay attention to her husband, making sure she knew what he was up to at any given time. He further mentioned that Jen Eyre mysteriously knew things about him, and Meredith that he couldn't understand how she knew. On February 14, 2008, Valentine's Day, Jen Eyre finally got the proof she had been looking for. However, Mark's admission of an affair with Meredith came at a cost to Jen Eyre, who admitted to him that she had hired a company to gain access to his phone, permitting her to read his text messages and view his photos and records of calls he had exchanged with Meredith. Mark admitted the truth to Jen Eyre. He had indeed fallen for Meredith because he knew he could not keep up with the lie any longer. Heartbroken and refusing to give up on her husband, Jen Eyre asked Mark to attend marriage counseling, which he agreed to attend. On the day of their second session, Mark said he was putting on his jacket when he felt something bulging in the lining of his coat. At first, he thought it was an anti-theft device, but upon opening the jacket, he found a recording device. It was recording him at that exact moment with its lights already flashing. At that particular time, Mark was very furious and confronted his wife. In response, Jen Eyre told him she wanted to understand the degree to which Meredith and he were involved in a relationship. She was determined that there was a plan between Meredith and him, and she was trying to listen to what that plan was. From then on, the relationship between Mark and Jen Eyre would fall apart at an accelerated rate. Finally, Mark told Jen Eyre that he planned on filing for divorce in May of 2018, after he had met Delaware residency requirements and could move out of their shared house. Things were going well during this time, especially for Meredith Chapman, who accepted a new job offer as the assistant vice president at Villanova University in Pennsylvania and relocated to Radnor Township, Pennsylvania, a part of the Main Line region. Meredith and her husband were getting divorced as well, so that she could continue to pursue her new relationship with Mark, and they could eventually be together. As Meredith and Mark's relationship grew, Jen Eyre began to consult with divorce coach Sheila Brennan, who observed that Jen Eyre harbored a significant amount of bitterness and anger due to her rejection and replacement by a younger woman. Having recently relocated to the north, and yet to secure a new job after losing her previous one, Jen Eyre harbored numerous fears of financial instability. Things seemed to go from bad to worse for Jen Eyre, and all of this had destroyed her mental health. Mark recommended that she see a psychiatrist and also seek support from family and friends, as she had even threatened to jump out of the window. Jen Eyre took the advice and seemed to accept the forthcoming divorce. Jen Eyre approached her husband one day with a list of requests for the weeks leading up to his officially moving out. Mark said he believed that they had gotten through the worst things, but little did he know that this was far from the truth, and that the worst was yet to come. Among the items on her list were going on hikes, having dinner, and generally spending some time together. Mark agreed to play along with Jen Eyre's requests, stating, "It was odd, but I'm trying to land this thing so she is in a good place. If this is what she needed, Then I was going to do that. Mark said his wife was acting normally for the most part, although she would occasionally break down and cry over the next few weeks. Jen Eyre also began posting on the neighborhood app, Nextdoor, asking for recommendations for an excellent marriage counselor for a couple on the brink of divorce. She wrote, "You will need someone who is very educated and experienced in dealing with couples' issues, including infidelity, depression, traumatic experiences, child-parent dynamics, and accountability for actions." However, in secret, she had been planning revenge. Mark and Jen Eyre had scheduled a dinner meeting to discuss the divorce agreement on April 23, 2018. However, Jen Eyre sent a series of messages informing her husband, who was already at the restaurant, that she was running late. She then sent him another text, telling him to go home because she wouldn't make it. As Mark prepared to leave, he received a picture from Jen Eyre a few minutes later. She sent him a picture of trash with a condom in the middle, which made him believe she was searching through Meredith's trash can outside her home. He then received more text messages, one of which read, "You ruined my life." The next two messages that Jen Eyre sent Mark read, "I hope you never find happiness," and another read by Mark. Mark tried to text and call Meredith multiple times, fearing for her safety and afraid of what Jen Eyre might do to her. Unfortunately, all forms of communication went unanswered. He rushed to Meredith's house, expecting to find a fight between Jen Eyre and Meredith. But when he arrived, he found something worse than he could ever have imagined. He found Meredith face down on her kitchen floor, with a pool of blood forming around her head. He also found his wife's body lying on the floor nearby. Mark stated it took 5 seconds, and I screamed in obscenity and ran to her. He continued, "I just said, 'Baby, oh baby, what have you done?'" Meredith had just posted on Instagram about her new position at Villanova University, expressing how excited she was. Later that evening, she returned home to her Radnor Township residence and went inside, unaware that Jen Eyre had broken in and was lying in wait. Neighbor Tim Emby heard the noise and went to see what was happening. Mark told him to call 911. When Sergeant Christopher Four of the Radnor Township Police arrived, he described the scene as chaotic, with many officers on the scene. They placed Mark, who appeared distressed, in an ambulance and took him to the police station as a suspect. The police concluded that Jen Eyre had broken into Meredith's home, killed Meredith, and then taken her own life after questioning Mark and investigating the scene. The day after the incident, police received a tip about a woman in a trench coat, hat, sunglasses, and possible wig, watching the house with binoculars. They also found car keys at the scene that matched a Cadillac Jen Eyre had rented. Mark was shocked to learn about the rented Cadillac, discovering most of the information from the police and news. She had rented the car 2 weeks before the incident and parked it near their apartment. Mark started digging deeper, reviewing his wife's financial records and computer files. He found that she had been living a double life. After Mark admitted to an affair around Valentine's Day, Jen Eyre opened secret bank accounts and credit cards, using them to buy surveillance equipment, lockpicking tools, hacking software, and DNA testing kits. Mark mentioned that she also bought and attached GPS tracking devices to their cars. According to Mark, Jen Eyre had over 400 images of private conversations he and Meredith had through text and Snapchat. She would access his phone at night while he was asleep, using his thumbprint to unlock it. Jen Eyre bought a gun 5 weeks before the tragic murder-suicide and practiced using it at a firing range. Her husband, Mark, discovered that she had been secretly recording him by hiding devices in his clothes and keeping detailed files of hundreds of hours of audio. The night Jen Eyre killed Meredith and herself, she emailed her family a letter explaining her motives. She had started writing the letter weeks before and described her actions as payback for what Mark had done to her. Dr. Robbie Ludwig, a psychotherapist, suggested that listening to the recordings might have fueled Jen Eyre's anger and sense of betrayal. She may have become dangerous when she lost hope and decided to end her own and Meredith's lives in an act of vengeance. During a TV interview, Dr. Ozark revealed Jen Eyre left a 15-page letter stating she would have killed Mark if he had walked in on the crime. Mark expressed regret for how he handled the breakup, believing he had broken Jen Eyre's heart and contributed to her actions. Despite the tragedy, he still loves her and wishes he could take it all back. This story also underscores the profound impacts of betrayal and emotional pain, highlighting the necessity of addressing relationship problems openly and seeking help when needed. Furthermore, It illustrates the severe repercussions of mental health deterioration when left unchecked. Lastly, this cautionary tale stresses the importance of compassion, understanding, and preventive measures in mental health to avoid such tragic outcomes. Story 5. It was just after 2 a.m. on March 29, 2019, in Columbia, South Carolina. 21-year-old Samantha Josephson, a senior at the University of South Carolina, had been out with friends in the city's Five Points Entertainment District celebrating her upcoming graduation. Like so many college students nowadays, Samantha planned to call an Uber for a safe ride home at the end of the night. Little did she know that this routine decision would be the last one she ever made. Security camera footage shows Samantha approaching a black Chevrolet Impala, likely mistaking it for her Uber driver's vehicle. Within minutes of getting into that car, her life would be tragically cut short by the man behind the wheel, 24-year-old Nathaniel Rowland. Rowland didn't pick up Samantha by accident that night. He was specifically hunting for young female victims through his methods of posing as an Uber driver. The unthinkable reality is that Samantha Josephson was trapped, abducted, and murdered in a random act of horrendous violence before her loved ones could even realize she was missing. Her body was dumped in remote woods over 60 miles away, left to be discovered by hunters 65 agonizing hours later. As details of this heinous crime emerged, the nation was left grappling not just with the senseless loss of a young life, but alarming questions about the safety of rideshare services like Uber and Lyft. Consumers place a certain amount of trust in background check systems when using these burgeoning technologies. How could something like this happen? And what steps need to be taken to prevent such awful predatory crimes in the future? Samantha was a vivacious and ambitious young student, a beacon of light on the University of South Carolina campus. Little did anyone suspect that seemingly ordinary night out would lead to a series of events that would shatter the lives of those who knew and loved her. Born to Seymour and Marcy Josephson in Princeton, New Jersey, Samantha grew up in Robbinsville. As a child, her dreams and aspirations took root, blossoming into a passion for political science and a desire to make a difference in the world. At the University of South Carolina, she pursued her studies with unwavering dedication. Her sights set on graduating in 2019 and attending the prestigious Drexel University School of Law, where she hoped to specialize in international law. Samantha's achievements were remarkable. She earned a full scholarship to Drexel and a partial scholarship to Rutgers, testament to her academic excellence. Her thirst for knowledge extended beyond the classroom, as she studied abroad in Barcelona and visited Madrid and Paris, adopting new cultures and life experiences. With her radiant beauty and captivating smile, Samantha had a magnetic presence that drew people to her. Samantha had a boyfriend named Greg, and the couple was very close to each other. They were soulmates, their connection so profound that not a day went by without constant communication, whenever it was possible. Their love transcended mere companionship. It was a partnership built on mutual dreams and aspirations. Samantha and Greg had carefully crafted plans for a future together, a future that would withstand the challenges of her upcoming law school journey. Greg, steadfast in his support, was determined to stand by her side, with intentions to move in with her and provide the emotional and practical support she would need as she pursued her legal studies. Everything seemed to be falling into place until that fateful night of March 29, 2019, when Samantha's world took an irreversible turn and her bright future was tragically brought to an end. On the evening of March 28th, Samantha had planned a night out with her roommate and friends in Columbia. Greg, her boyfriend, was supposed to join them, but circumstances kept him in his hometown. Undeterred, he encouraged Samantha to go out and have fun. Little did he know that this night would be their last conversation. Before going out, Samantha was gloomy after hearing of a family member's ailment and sought solace in the company of her friends, hoping to lift her spirits. The group visited a few bars before settling at the Bird Dog Bar, a popular hangout spot for students in the Five Points area in downtown Columbia. Throughout the night, Samantha remained in constant communication with Greg, her boyfriend, pleading with him to make the 2-hour drive to Columbia, craving his emotional support. However, the couple had already made plans to see each other the following weekend. Unaware of the tragedy that was about to unfold, Greg decided to stay put. Around 2 a.m., Samantha decided to head back to her apartment alone, a decision that would prove fateful. Relying on the familiar routine of using a rideshare service, she called an Uber. a common practice among her peers. Little did she know that fate had other plans, delivering her into the hands of a cold-blooded murderer. In her final conversation with Greg at around 2:04 a.m., Samantha assured him that she was headed home and had taken an Uber, a decision she made countless times in the past to safely navigate the city streets. Moments later, security cameras captured her approaching a car, only to notice it was not her intended ride. After retreating to the sidewalk, a black Chevrolet Impala, driven by a man later identified as Nathaniel David Rowland, pulled up. Assuming this was her ride, Samantha bid farewell to Greg and hopped into the back seat, unaware of the horror that awaited her. Within moments, the Impala sped off into the night, and the Uber that Samantha had ordered arrived at the pickup location, only to find its intended passenger gone. From that point on, only Samantha and her captor knew the truth. She had unwittingly entered the wrong car, a mistake that would seal her tragic fate. CCTV footage later revealed that the black Chevrolet Impala had circled the area numerous times, indicating a calculated and predatory approach. Rowland, well aware of the gatherings of college students in 5 Points after the bars closed, knew exactly what he was doing that night. Greg, Samantha's devoted boyfriend, tracked her movements using the Find My Friends app, ensuring she made it home safely. However, as he watched her location move in the opposite direction of her apartment, concern began to set in. Initially, he dismissed the detour, assuming she might be visiting a friend's place. But when his texts and calls went unanswered, and her phone's location stopped sharing, a sense of dread washed over him. Hoping against hope that Samantha had simply misplaced her phone in the Uber, Greg contacted her friends and roommates, only to find that no one had heard from her or seen her return home. With a heavy heart, he tried to get some sleep, clinging to the hope that she would turn up in the morning. Sadly, that hope was shattered when Samantha remained missing the following day. Her roommates, deeply concerned, reported her disappearance, and Greg made the 2-hour drive to Columbia to assist in the search for his beloved girlfriend. Less than 24 hours after Samantha was last seen on the surveillance video, a group of turkey hunters made a gruesome discovery in a wooded area in New Zion, about 65 miles away from 5 Points. They had stumbled upon the lifeless body of a young woman, later confirmed to be Samantha Josephson. The autopsy revealed the horrific extent of the violence inflicted upon her. Samantha's body bore over 120 separate stab wounds, with injuries to her face, head, neck, hands, upper body, legs, and feet. Her fingernails were hacked to pieces, a testament to her desperate struggle to shield herself from the razor-sharp blade that relentlessly tore into her flesh. The autopsy report indicated that she had been stabbed with a double-bladed knife and then dragged to the woods, her body nearly drained of blood. Investigators swiftly obtained the surveillance footage from the bar, which revealed the moment when Samantha unknowingly entered her killer's car. The footage showed the black Chevrolet Impala circling the block several times, suggesting that the driver was actively hunting for a potential victim. It became clear that Samantha had accidentally gotten into her killer's car, mistaking it for her Uber. The Uber she had called arrived shortly after, but upon finding no passenger, the driver canceled the trip and left, unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded. Investigators believe that Rowland had used child-proof locks to trap Samantha inside the vehicle, leaving her with no means of escape. With the descriptions of the car widely circulated in hopes of finding the perpetrator before he struck again, it didn't take long for a break in the case to emerge. The day after Samantha's body was discovered, officers on routine patrol spotted the black Chevrolet Impala cruising the very same area where she had been kidnapped. When they attempted to pull the car over, the driver, identified as 24-year-old Nathaniel David Rowland, a resident of New Zion, fled on foot. After a short chase, he was apprehended, and the investigation took a chilling turn. Inside Rowland's car, officers found a child's car seat in the back, surrounded by what appeared to be bloodstains, prompting them to call for backup and treat the vehicle as a potential crime scene. As homicide detectives combed through the car, they uncovered overwhelming evidence. Copious amounts of blood on the passenger seat and in the trunk, a bloody footprint on one of the rear windows, and Samantha's cell phone lying on the floorboards. Further examination revealed that Rowland had attempted to sell Samantha's phone to a pawn shop earlier that day, but had left it in the car when the pawn shop offered him a mere $125 for it. The detectives also found the child locks activated, confirming their suspicion that Rowland had used this tactic to trap Samantha inside the vehicle. During his interrogation, Roland continuously denied any knowledge of Samantha's kidnapping and murder, even as the evidence mounted against him. However, a physical examination revealed traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails, a damning piece of evidence that contradicted his claims of innocence. Piecing together the terrifying details of Samantha's final moments, detectives speculated that she had been the victim of a blitz attack. The engaged, child-proof locks led them to conclude that Roland had activated them as soon as Samantha entered the car, leaving her helpless and trapped. In a brutal and ferocious assault, Roland repeatedly stabbed Samantha with a double-bladed knife, her mangled fingernails and numerous defensive wounds on her hands, a testament to her desperate struggle to survive. Caught unawares and defenseless against the vicious attack, Samantha could not have scratched her assailant, explaining the absence of Roland's DNA under her nails. After the heinous act, Roland drove to a secluded farmer's access road in New Zion, an area only a local would know, and discarded Samantha's body in the nearby woods. Returning home, Roland carried on with his day, nonchalantly posting on social media as if nothing had happened. His familiarity with the area where Samantha's remains were found, and the proximity of his residence to the crime scene, further implicated him as the killer. A glimpse into Roland's background revealed a disturbing pattern. He was a devout churchgoer who had attended South Carolina State University in 2017, though it was unclear if he had graduated or what he was doing for employment at the time of the murder. More alarmingly, Roland had a prior felony arrest in October 2018 for obtaining a signature for property under false pretenses. In a chilling incident, Roland and an accomplice had carjacked a woman, assaulting her and forcing her to drive to an ATM, where they stole her money. They then compelled her to drive home, robbing her of additional belongings, including a PlayStation 4. While Roland was never convicted of robbing the woman, he did sell some of her stolen possessions, including the PlayStation 4. When detectives obtained a search warrant for Roland's girlfriend's apartment in New Zion, where he lived, the evidence against him grew even more damning. In the trash bins behind the apartment, they found a sock and bandana allegedly belonging to Roland, heavily stained with Samantha's blood. Inside the apartment, they uncovered a white sheet with bloodstains, a roll of duct tape, bleach wipes with traces of blood, and a two-bladed knife that appeared to have blood on it. Subsequent tests confirmed that the blood found on the knife, sheets, bleach wipes, and in the car matched Samantha Josephson's DNA. With the overwhelming evidence against him mounting rapidly, Roland was initially charged with possessing a weapon during a violent crime, the kidnapping, and the murder of Samantha Josephson. The trial that followed was a grueling ordeal for Samantha's family, as Nathaniel Roland pleaded not guilty, maintaining his claims of innocence despite the mountain of evidence against him. When the trial began in the summer of 2021, Roland's defense team argued that their client was an innocent man, basing their defense largely on the fact that his DNA had not been found on the alleged victim. However, prosecutors countered these claims with the undeniable weight of the evidence they had amassed. They presented the CCTV footage showing Roland's car picking up Samantha in 5 points and driving away, the pools of her blood found in his vehicle, her bloody footprint on the back window, allegations that he had tried to use her bank card at an ATM after disposing of her body, cell phone trackers placing their devices in the same location at the time of murder, and the fact that he lived near where her remains were discovered. Additionally, a handwriting expert was brought in to compare Roland's writing to a chilling list found in his home, which read duct tape, tape her whole body, gloves, all black, flip phone, gasoline matches. The expert testified that it was highly likely Roland had written the list, suggesting a premeditated and calculated plan. The prosecution called 31 witnesses to testify, including someone who had seen Roland cleaning the murder weapon, the pawn shop owner to whom he had tried to sell Samantha's cell phone, and his ex-girlfriend who claimed that her daughter had blood on her shoe after being in Roland's car after the murder. Roland, on the other hand, called no witnesses, and none of his family members testified on his behalf. Despite maintaining his innocence and pleading with the judge, it took the jury only an hour to deliver a guilty verdict. Nathaniel Roland was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a just punishment for his despicable actions, but little solace for the Josephson family, who had lost their beloved Samantha in the most tragic of circumstances. In the wake of Samantha's murder, her parents, Seymour and Marcy Josephson, took it upon themselves to ensure that no one else would suffer the same fate as their daughter. With this goal in mind, they started the What's My Name Foundation, which encourages people of all ages who use rideshare services to ask the driver to identify them by name before entering a stranger's vehicle. The Josephsons also promoted a safety protocol they called SAMS, which stands for Stop, Ask, Match, and Inform. This protocol encourages rideshare users to be vigilant and take proactive steps to ensure their safety. In the aftermath of Samantha's murder, the rideshare industry also took steps to protect drivers and passengers alike. One of the safeguards implemented was the issuance of a personalized 4-digit code that riders could use to confirm through the app that they were getting into the right car. Samantha Lee Josephson's untimely death sent shockwaves through the hearts of her family, friends, and the community she touched. The pain they bear is immeasurable, a testament to the bright light that Samantha was in their lives. Her story serves as a stark reminder that tragedy can strike unexpectedly, and her memory should inspire us to be vigilant, look out for one another, and work collectively toward creating a world where safety and compassion prevail. As we reflect on Samantha's life and the senseless circumstances that led to her death, we are reminded of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing every moment. Her story is a call to action, urging us to be more mindful of the potential dangers that lurk in the shadows of our daily routines, and to take proactive steps to protect ourselves and those we love. While the pain of Samantha's loss will never truly fade, her legacy lives on through the actions of her family and the initiatives they have championed to promote safety and awareness. May her story serve as a catalyst for positive change, inspiring us to be more vigilant, more compassionate, and more dedicated to creating a world where tragedies like this never occur again. In the end, Samantha's life, though cut short, was a bright flame that illuminated the hearts of many. Let us honor her memory by carrying that light forward, spreading warmth and kindness in her name, and working tirelessly to build a safer, more just world for all. Story 6. The story revolves around a pampered rich girl, cherished by her parents. At the age of 16, she went to study in Australia, got pregnant at 19, married at 20, but tragically died after giving birth to a son at the age of 21, thus abruptly ending her short life. The forensic examination revealed that her brain had suffered at least 33 severe injuries. The scene was indescribably horrific. What exactly did she experience in Australia? What kind of hatred would drive someone to commit such a heinous act? As the police investigated, the underlying reasons behind these events are both shocking and deeply saddening. Hello, welcome to the Crime Documentary Files channel. Now, let us turn our attention to Australia to uncover the details behind this case. Victoria, Australia, known as a haven for education, hosts many of its most famous universities in Melbourne, making it a top destination for numerous international students. The city consistently ranks among the top 10 global destinations for international students. Lin Dan, the Chinese girl at the center of our story, was born into a wealthy and privileged family. Being an only child, her parents doted on her and supported her wish to study abroad in Australia, where she embarked on her educational journey alone at 16. What her parents never anticipated was that this step would lead her down a path of no return. Despite her lack of experience in living independently, she had to quickly learn to stand on her own feet, finding solace and company in school life beyond just her studies. She was also very active in campus activities and met Zhuang Rongping, an older student at a school dance. They quickly fell in love, a relationship she kept hidden from her parents due to the significant socioeconomic differences between their families. Zhuang's family came from a rural area in Fujian. Their relationship lasted over 2 years until Lin Dan discovered she was pregnant at 19 in 2009. Before she could figure out how to break the news to her parents, Zhuang Rongping's mother, Zhuang Huajiao, overwhelmed with joy about continuing the family line, a significant matter in rural Fujian, personally accompanied her son to Lin's family to plead for a marriage. Initially, Lin's family was reluctant to agree due to the great economic disparity between the families, and as Lin Dan was still very young, under 20 years old. However, impressed by the sincere attitudes and seeing that Zhuang Rongping was a decent person, they symbolically accepted a small bride price and agreed to the marriage. Soon after, the couple had a son in Australia. Zhuang Huajiao was thrilled to have a grandson and decided to move to this foreign land to take care of him, despite the language barrier and leaving behind her life of many years. Unbeknown to her, this decision would tragically ignite the events that followed. Married life was far from happy for Lin Dan, as she had to contend not just with her husband, but also his domineering mother, Zhuang Huajiao. Particularly, caring for the newborn brought numerous conflicts to the forefront. Zhuang Huajiao viewed her role in caring for her son and grandson as not only a duty, but as an entitlement, allowing her to exert control over the family. This attitude, which positioned her as the de facto head of the household, made Lin Dan very uncomfortable. From the moment she married, Lin Dan devoted herself completely to her husband and their home. Her husband's stable income supported the family, enabling Lin Dan to be a full-time homemaker. Initially, their life together was simple and joyful. However, the birth of their child marked the end of this idyllic period. Zhuang Huajiao's intrusive presence shattered Lin Dan's dreams and disrupted the family's peace. The vast differences in their educational levels and worldviews often resulted in loud arguments within the home. Zhuang Huajiao was a woman from a poor rural background who, desperate for a son amidst China's strict family planning policies, resorted to extreme measures to ensure her son's birth. This event brought joy, but also added strain to their already impoverished life. Luckily, her children thrived and settled in Australia with good incomes. Lin Dan, young, modern, and well-educated, had grown up in relative comfort and sought enjoyment in life. In contrast, Zhuang Huajiao had little education, spoke almost no foreign languages, and led a frugal life, holding on to materialistic and conservative values. These stark differences led to inevitable conflicts, especially over childcare. Lin Dan saw Zhuang Huajiao as crude and desired her own space, often dismissing her mother-in-law's outdated childcare views. As disagreements escalated, Lin Dan resorted to silence to avoid direct confrontations, further angering Zhuang Huajiao, who felt she deserved respect and gratitude. This tension led to repeated disputes, and eventually Lin Dan asked her mother-in-law to move out. Forced to leave her only son's home, Zhuang Huajiao's frustrations peaked, culminating in a tragic act of violence with a hammer. On May 4, 2012, Zhuang Huajiao arrived at a local police station in Melbourne. Due to the language barrier, she struggled to explain that she had accidentally killed her daughter-in-law during an argument the previous day and was there to turn herself in. Following her description, the police located the victim's body, which had been retrieved from the river. Although the blood had been washed away by the river water, the numerous scars on her brain were still shockingly visible. Since she had been distanced from her son's life, it was expected that any conflicts would gradually diminish over time. Why then did she brutally murder her daughter-in-law? Was there more to the story? The incident traces back to May 3, 2012. Perhaps due to missing her grandson, or the desire to live with her son again, Zhuang Huajiao, who usually resided at her daughter's home, asked her daughter to drive her to her son's house. She arrived around 3 p.m. Lin Dan was preparing to bathe her 2-year-old grandson at the time. Zhuang Huajiao criticized Lin Dan's method of bathing the child, claiming the bath water was too hot and not suitable for the child. Lin Dan disagreed and ignored her mother-in-law's opinion, insisting on bathing her son. This disagreement over a seemingly minor issue quickly escalated into a verbal and then physical altercation. According to what Zhuang Huajiao later told the police during her confession, Lin Dan first ran into the room, grabbed the hammer, and threatened to kill her. In self-defense, Zhuang Huajiao managed to grab the hammer and, acting first, struck Lin Dan, causing the 21-year-old to stop breathing. Zhuang Huajiao then put Lin Dan's body in a garbage bag, dragged it to a wheeled bin, and later that night took it to a riverbank about 700 meters from the house. There, she threw the nylon bag into the river and pushed the bin in after it. In this cold and dark setting, Lin Dan's lifeless body was subjected to one last ordeal. Meanwhile, Zhuang Rongbing came home to find his young son crying alone in his room. Although his wife was missing, he assumed she might have stepped out to shop and chose to soothe his child to sleep before he himself fell asleep. The next morning, perhaps driven by fear or guilt, Zhuang Huajiao went to the police station on her own accord to confess. However, the police investigation revealed discrepancies in her story. They found that Lin Dan had suffered at least 33 medium force blows, causing a deep indentation on her skull, a broken nose and chin, shattered teeth, and damaged gums. Her arms and fingers also showed signs of bruising and fractures, mostly defensive wounds. However, no defensive wounds were found on Zhuang Huajiao, suggesting that the real scenario was not as she described. It wasn't Lin Dan who attacked first. Rather, Zhuang Huajiao had repeatedly struck her daughter-in-law with the hammer. Despite Lin Dan's attempts to dodge and defend herself, she tragically fell into a pool of blood in front of her 2-year-old son, ending her life within a few seconds at the age of 21. In the final moments of her life, where was her husband? Zhuang Rongping was well aware of the conflicts between his mother and his wife. According to what he told the police, his mother had repeatedly told him that he should leave his wife. Zhuang Huajiao had struggled through a difficult life to raise her children, especially emphasizing the experience of hiding Zhuang Rongping in a pig pen to save him, which made it difficult for Zhuang Rongping, out of filial piety, to contradict his mother. He not only endured this himself, but also asked Lin Dan to forbear and try not to upset his mother. However, this endurance was meaningless, as Zhuang Huajiao's resentment had become too heavy to reconcile. Moreover, she became even angrier when she learned that Lin Dan had obtained Australian residency through marriage to her son. She told her son that any other woman marrying a permanent resident like him could get at least $100,000. But Lin Dan had not brought any money into the marriage, and even required a dowry from them, which she found utterly disadvantageous. Lin Dan was simply not good enough for him, and he should divorce her and remarry someone wealthier. Although Zhuang Rongping felt his mother's actions were inappropriate, he could not bring himself to blame her and always advised his wife to endure. Zhuang Rongping never made much effort to mediate the conflict between his mother and his wife. Whether it was due to the shackles of filial piety, a sense of helplessness, or simply not wanting to expend the energy, he remained invisible in the conflict between the two women. If he had spoken up more often and used his emotional intelligence to manage the tense mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship, he might not have faced such a tragic outcome. Even on the night of the incident, when he returned home and found his wife missing, he did nothing. Initially, he did not mention any discord between them to the police, thinking it was all in the past. Similarly, the silence was also shown by Zhuang Huajiao's husband. Although the couple had come to Australia together, only Zhuang Huajiao actively participated in their son's life, while her husband lived at their daughter's home. Even after the incident, there was no mention of her husband in the reports. This absence of the man of the Zhuang family and the conflict centered around the family's interests is an ironic statement. Perhaps it was this intentional or unintentional neglect and silence that made Zhuang Huajiao even more obsessed with controlling her daughter-in-law. This case of domestic homicide within a Chinese family quickly dominated the news in Australia, with the media dubbing the 50-year-old Zhuang Huajiao with various cold nicknames such as Grandmother Killer and Hammer Killer, emphasizing her cruelty and cold-blooded nature. In early 2014, the Victoria High Court in Australia began a public trial of the case. The jury was informed early on of the various conflicts between the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, and the defense attorney told Zhuang Huajiao that admitting to the killing with remorse might help in the trial, as this was not the worst case of premeditated murder and was not beyond redemption. However, Zhuang Huajiao insisted on her version of events, claiming self-defense and not admitting to the murder charge. Witnesses at the trial, including neighbors, colleagues, and classmates, confirmed Zhuang Huajiao's poorly concealed malice towards Lin Dan. Neighbors saw Zhuang Huajiao slap Lin Dan in the car, and others saw her forcibly cut Lin Dan's hair. There were even instances where Zhuang Huajiao teased her ignorant little grandson, asking if he wanted a new mother, and even once threatening Lin Dan, saying, "Do you believe I can kill you?" Despite this, Lin Dan heeded her husband's advice and continued to endure. Lin Dan's parents, filled with grief, testified in court about how Zhuang Rongping and his family had initially earnestly pleaded to marry their daughter, which later turned into malice during their cohabitation. After symbolically receiving some dowry, they even demanded it back, thinking their daughter was marrying above her station. Lin Dan had once run back to her parents' home, complaining about her mistreatment, but eventually returned to her husband and child, only to be called back overseas. Based on these pieces of evidence, the jury in May found Zhuang Huajiao guilty of murder. However, there was still debate over her sentencing between the prosecution and the defense. Defense attorney Gardner argued that Zhuang Huajiao might be deported back to China after serving her sentence, and the thought of being separated from her husband, children, and grandson, all of whom would continue to live in Australia, would be a huge mental burden during her imprisonment. Additionally, psychiatric reports showed that Zhuang Huajiao suffered from chronic depression due to isolation in prison, and hence a lighter sentence should be considered. However, prosecutor Lewis argued that despite the lack of premeditation, Zhuang Huajiao's act of killing in front of a 2-year-old child was extremely cruel and should not be treated leniently. After considering the case and the discussions from both sides, in August 2014, Judge K of the Victoria High Court ultimately sentenced Zhuang Huajiao to 18 years in prison, with the possibility of parole only after serving 13 and a half years. Until the sentencing, Zhuang Huajiao never admitted to intentionally killing her daughter-in-law. Disheveled, she just wept with her face covered. Throughout the months-long trial, Zhuang Huajiao hardly saw her son, Zhuang Ronping, who stated that his mother had killed his wife in a brutal manner, and he no longer wished to have any contact or involvement with her. He also said he would take care of his son with the help of his neighbors, who had moved to Australia. In 2015, the public prosecutor believed that the sentencing was insufficient and appealed. The court ruled on May 13th that Zhuang Huajiao's sentence was to be extended to 22 years, and that she must serve at least 17 years in prison. The previous considerations of Judge K, such as her turning herself in and personal reasons, were deemed as weak grounds for leniency. The panel of 3 judges pointed out directly that this was a brutal murder. This means that Zhuang Huajiao, at the age of about 53, will likely spend the rest of her life in a foreign prison. Even if released, she will face deportation, forever separated from her dearest family. This punishment may be heavy enough for her, but it will never bring back Lin Dan's life. Ms. Chung, the mother of the victim Lin Dan, said that she often had nightmares after the murder case erupted. She has never been able to believe that her daughter left her in such a manner. Before her death, Lin Dan had returned to China due to terrible abuse from her mother-in-law and other family members and lived with her parents for a while. Later, she was persuaded by her husband to return to Australia, which broke Ms. Cheng's heart and made her worry about her daughter's safety. Since the incident, she has been living with anxiety, depression, and stress. Psychologists have diagnosed that the incident has led to a variety of mental illnesses for her, and it may take a very long time to heal the wounds suffered by the family, perhaps even a lifetime. That concludes the sharing of this case. In this incident, 2 once strangers became a family because of the same man, both wanting to make efforts for the happiness of the family. They should have cared for and cherished each other, but it resulted in such a regrettable tragedy. The relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law is an eternal topic. When 2 unfamiliar women suddenly live under the same roof, it's inevitable they go through many adjustments. If both sides were willing to consider each other and retreat a step when facing conflicts, with less control and more tolerance, treating each other truly as family, how happy it would be. The role of the man in the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship is crucial and can be said to have a decisive effect on the development of the relationship. If Zhuang Ronping had stood up to mediate the conflicts and protected his wife when his mother slandered her, he might have made his mother realize her mistake and appeased her anger. And his wife would have suffered less and not left home or been driven away, thus avoiding escalating conflicts. Unfortunately, such real-life tragedies cannot rewrite their endings, perhaps reflecting the everyday life of countless families. There is a classic line from the TV series Ode to Joy that life is full of troubles, but we must still sing joyously in progress. The road to growth may have roses and thorns, but nothing can stop a strong heart. Story 7. The story unfolds in the heart of Indianapolis, where sleek modernity merges with age-old traditions to create an enthralling scene. This city, a vibrant melting pot of cultures, not only boasts art museums that honor past achievements, but also hosts a plethora of lively festivals and events, most notably the famous Indy 500. However, for the Blackburn family, this multicultural oasis was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place of tranquility, a true home for their faith and commitment. Little did they know that on the morning of November 10th, 2015, their lives would be upended by a devastating tragedy. The stage was set for a nightmare when an unfamiliar car pulled into Sunnyfield Court, just as Davy Blackburn was out for his usual morning workout. Davy, a handsome man, was on his way back from his regular exercise session. He sat in his car for quite a while, engrossed in a phone call. Unaware, he was just minutes away from his life falling apart. A chilling silence enveloped him as he walked up to his front door, gym bag in hand. His world collapsed when he saw what was inside. He knew what it was. Blood. Blood was everywhere in the sacred space of their living room. His beloved wife lay motionless, the floor stained red. Time seemed to stand still as the weight of the world pressed down on him, his hands shaking as he dropped the gym bag. Davy hurried to know what had happened to his beloved wife. His world crashed into a kaleidoscope of chaos and terror. His beloved wife, Amanda, lay lifeless on the floor as blood spread in their home. His hands quivered as he frantically sought any indication of movement. A wave of comfort washed over him when he detected the subtle beat of her heart. Help was desperately needed, and nothing else mattered at that moment. In the rescue operator's screaming voice, Davy surveyed the living room, which had transformed into a disturbing scene of chaos. In the mayhem upstairs, their child's pitiful sobs pierced the stillness, a tragic reminder of an innocence lost forever. Sunnyfield Court, which had been peaceful just seconds before, became a maelstrom of dazzling lights and chaotic activity in an instant. Investigators and police officials surrounded the home, recording every detail in the hopes of solving the horrible mystery that lay within. However, to grasp the gravity of this tragedy, one must explore the core of Amanda Grace Byers, a girl who was born into a household of unwavering belief and commitment to Jesus. From her childhood, in the Christian birthplaces of Muskegon, Michigan, and Indianapolis, she had a deep respect for the authority of God's Word. Amanda exemplified the principles that shaped her family's spiritual path as the daughter of a senior pastor. She had no idea that the road she was on would bring her to the edge of a terrifying trial that would put her faith and the relationships that bound her world to the test. Holy chorus melodies and reverent whispers of Scripture engulfed Amanda's world from the minute she took her first breath. She embraced the church's religious customs with unfaltering dedication. They had become an integral part of her identity, more than just a set of ceremonies. In contrast to her friends, Amanda had a greater purpose in life. She was not interested in the transient pleasures of adulthood. Instead of fantasizing about wild parties and short relationships, she envisioned a life spent serving Jesus, the one true love she had known from the beginning. Well, it seemed as if God had created her in the likeness of an angel, a fragile golden-haired beauty whose kindness and generosity concealed a soul even more magnificent. She loves everyone she meets with her unwavering devotion, which radiates from her impeccable appearance and her heart, which is devoured by faith. Amanda made a solemn vow of purity during her formative teenage years, promising to wait until the holy union of marriage to experience the value of a lover's touch. She would remain steadfast in her commitment, even as destiny brought her the one man deserving of her love, Davy Blackburn. Davy Blackburn, a fellow Alabaman from Tuscaloosa, studied the Bible with the same sincere zeal. Their fates became inseparable the minute they met at a Hawk Nelson Christian Band concert on a blind date, which was arranged by the power of God. The connection that Amanda and Davy shared knew no bounds, even though they were physically separated by distance. Every holiday became a holy journey, a time to celebrate the genuine, intimate affection that burned in their souls. As they walked holding each other's hand, they exchanged religious books that had shaped their spiritual path, personal thoughts, and cherished passages. Nothing brought them more happiness than the simplest of occasions, like the milkshake competition where Amanda came out on top, earning Davy the loving nickname Milk Girl. His heart was engulfed in flames as he understood in that split second that she was the one he wanted to marry. The unceasing flow of texts and hours-long discussions kept their bond alive, even while their academic endeavors drove them apart. They sought the advice of a psychologist, intent on developing a connection based on deep understanding and respect. Because they approached love with such reverence, they finally had their marriage blessed in front of family and God on August 1st, 2008. And as Davy kissed Amanda for the first time, he knew with all his heart that their souls were bound together in an eternal union. Following that unforgettable day, he told his buddies that when their lips met, something profound happened, a seismic event that changed their lives for the better, leading them on a journey guided by God. As newlyweds, the Blackburns enjoyed the balmy South Carolina weather for the first 4 years of their union. Under Pastor Perry Noble's guidance, Davy was serving as an associate pastor at New Spring Church when he began to experience an unsettling longing inside. This summoning could no longer be repressed. He shifted his gaze to Amanda, his beloved companion. He dared them to leave everything behind and go to Indianapolis, where they would build an environment for young people's spiritual needs. The thought of leaving her beloved hometown broke Amanda's heart, but Davy's unshakable faith that God had greater plans for her life helped her to persevere. They left the comfort of South Carolina in 2012 to begin their divine mission of establishing a prominent, autonomous church on the north side of Indianapolis. This youthful religious group, which they had lovingly built by their own hands, served as a lighthouse for the wandering souls of the youth. In their weekly videos, the Blackbins shared advice on intimacy, conflict resolution, and relationships, creating a safe space for the next generation to find comfort and guidance. Their unwavering commitment paid off in 2014 when they welcomed a son, Weston, who brought an abundance of joy into their lives. The Blackburn family appeared to have achieved ecstasy on earth, with their beloved home on a quiet street, their flourishing ministry, and their devoted band of young followers completely oblivious to the tempest that was approaching. The weight of their teachings reached the hearts of believers like a song, and their sermons resounded like sacred hymns. The Blackburns were one in perfect harmony, a marriage of heavenly kindness and comprehension. However, the harsh truth of the world will eventually reawaken even the most perfect dreamscapes. A violent disturbance broke the peaceful routines of the Blackburn family on that tragic November 10th, 2015. The tranquil atmosphere of Sunnyfield Court was shattered as the sound of ambulance sirens sounded, setting in motion a frantic race against the clock. A heroic array of resuscitative procedures battled to thwart the impending doom as Amanda's strength dwindled. She had been rushed to the hospital. Unfortunately, Amanda and the life she was carrying, a daughter they had affectionately called Evie Grace, left this world the day after in the wake of this terrible loss, and strangers took to social media to express their condolences and offer prayers for the family and friends of the deceased. In everyone's sorrow, Davy spoke these words on November 11th, the day Amanda's official death was announced. Amanda made it her life's calling to love and serve all she knew, sharing the good news of Jesus Christ, whom she had accepted as her own Savior, was her life's work. Because of her life and work, many others will come to trust in Christ as Savior. She would want me to carry on the sacred mission we started in Indianapolis. I know it with absolute certainty. Davy remained steadfast in his faith, even as catastrophe loomed over him, casting a dark cloud over the hope that was fading. He made a bold statement against how he felt, proclaiming, "I firmly believe that God is still good." His transformation of our grief into victory is very remarkable. We have only just begun. The murder of Amanda sent seismic shockwaves through the Orthodox community and the entire state, and no amount of stirring affirmations could calm them. There was a massive uproar and a strong need for justice. Someone must be held responsible for the unspeakable atrocity committed against Amanda and her unborn child. Amanda, Davy's lover, lay partially naked and face down in a blood-splattered pool in his first sworn testimony. 3 terrible bullet wounds, including one that had ripped through her skull, were evident in the scene. He described his routine 6 a.m. workout leaving their home and the door being carelessly left unlocked. A minor slip-up that gave the burglars an open invitation. "You always do that too, don't you?" He confessed to the investigators, his voice betraying his sadness. "Leave and don't lock the door." Although it is still unclear if the attackers would have been discouraged by a barred door, one harsh reality could not be avoided. Amanda had lost valuable time that may have called for help. Her awful fate could have been changed by these times. A desperate hunt for solutions followed the heinous act. Amid all the chaos, Davy's innocence was quickly proven and his name was cleansed. However, the first responder, Scott Floyd, told a terrifying story in the trial transcripts. Standing alone at the end of the driveway, his hands covered in crimson, his testimony paints a chilling picture of Davy, a portrayal of strange stillness belying the chaos within. Scott claimed that Davy's expressions revealed an eerie disconnection, as if he were a guy disconnected from reality, who couldn't believe the unspeakable tragedy that had befallen the one he loved. Following the incomprehensible calamity, there was a mad dash to find answers, but Davy Blackburn was quickly cleared of any wrongdoing by the investigating team. However, the first paramedic on the site, Scott Floyd, saw a terrifying scene as revealed in the trial audio. According to his account, there was an unsettling stillness over Davy as he stood alone at the driveway's end, his hands red from the spill while the commotion of the emergency cars encircled him. Davy did not understand what had happened to Amanda, Scott says, his voice resonating around the courtroom. He insisted he was unable to help her while she lay on the floor. During those terrifying seconds, Davy's morning routine was disrupted and his life was suddenly turned upside down. He recalled getting off the gym at about 7 in the morning, continuing a call with his friend Kenneth Wagner, and pacing the driveway, every so often to peek out the front window, hoping to see his son Weston awake from his sleep, unaware to the horror that was happening inside. As Davy spoke under the weight of his words, 12 minutes is a long time in an emergency. The sound of the ticking clock reverberated throughout the courts. At 8:10 in the morning, he returned home to discover his world in shambles. Amanda lay motionless on the floor, lying face down. He hoped that his pregnant wife had fallen victim to simple dizziness in the 12 minutes leading up to his urgent 8:22 a.m. call. The story that Davy had built up was compromised nevertheless by the devastating evidence of Dr. Scott Floyd. According to the doctor's gloomy assessment, Amanda's savage attack happened hours ago, as indicated by the coagulated blood. These remarks cast doubt on his evidence and led to more questions than they answered. Had Davy really been so engrossed in his denial that he failed to notice the gruesome proof steps away from the corpse of his beloved? His pleading seemed sincere, but was there something deeper at work, hidden from view by the public? Did you call anyone else? Was a lingering query among the deluge of inquiries. In his response, Davy made the difficult confession that he sought comfort from his father following that terrifying 911 call. His exoneration was confirmed when authorities used GMM security footage to back up his explanation, and the defense chose not to cross-examine him. Despite this, the sad autopsy results beautifully depicted Amanda's dying moments. A gunshot going through the back of the head, another bursting through her arm and back, and her face a picture of cruelty with scrapes, a broken lip, and a lost tooth. The cold, hard evidence proved a tragedy that would rock the town to its very foundation. The shattered body of Amanda was a graphic representation of the violent conflict that had shaken the once peaceful neighborhood, and the cold, hard evidence corroborated this. Each new finding lowered the tragedy's profile as the painstaking investigation unfolded. Davy made a desperate plea for assistance 35 minutes before the rapid volley of gunfire broke the early morning silence, according to neighbors, whose voices were mixed with shock. Even as a longtime resident, Reginald had a hard time imagining such heinousness taking place on their peaceful street. Here the Blackburns, that lovely, loving family, seemed to be unaffected by the harsh realities of the outside world. Nevertheless, a peculiar pattern became apparent as the pieces started to fall into place. In the early hours of November 10th, the town felt the presence of a malevolent power. A ghostly figure haunted the neighborhood, causing devastation at every turn. At 5:20 a.m., the initial scream for assistance broke through the night. After waking up to see her home broken into, a woman discovered that her possessions had been stolen, including her car. Even with the sliding glass door open, the marks left by the invader were visible. The marauders' insatiable appetite claimed yet another house 3 hours afterward. The burglars were so ruthless that they stole a family's electronics, jewelry, laptops, and even basic items, like a sweatshirt and a bag of oranges, in a recent horrible smash and grab. 5 excruciating minutes later, Davy Blackburn's quavering voice added to the chorus of cries for help, ripping the last strands of the community's sense of safety. Tragically, the nightmare had finally arrived, bringing with it a trail of broken lives and mysteries that still needed solving. With his words, Lieutenant Richard shone a light into the darkness, piercing through the veil of sorrow. We're exploring every possible connection between the homicide and the string of burglaries plaguing this neighborhood. The police respected the sacredness of their pursuit of justice by remaining silent regarding the investigation's complexities. However, a change in strategy was implemented after peculiar photos of possible perpetrators emerged from one of the homes that had been raided. This involved appealing to the public and rallying them to help identify the anonymous burglars. Despite everything that had happened, Davy maintained his unshakable trust in the system, believing that the authorities would exhaust all possible avenues in their pursuit of justice for his wife's killer. His faith that these promising leads would soon pay off was shared by the investigators, who were encouraged by an unusual, unfettered authority. Innocent indicators like a stolen pink pullover, cell phone records, and an ATM transaction turned out to be the key to untangling this complex web. Following these clues, which were found in a stolen Chrysler Sebring, the law enforcement agencies would pursue 3 individuals. The debit card matched Amanda's when officials retrieved the vehicle on November 11th, just a short distance from the Blackburn home, adding further damning evidence. One of the perpetrators shamelessly covered their face with that bright pink sweater to evade detection by the ATM camera. A cruel storm was gathering, and the ruthless wreckers of this exquisite town were about to meet their maker. The noose was drawing closer, and justice was about to be served. The forces of justice rallied with resolute resolve following the horrific murder of Amanda. As investigators dug deeper into the case, a complex web of evidence began to emerge, including DNA tests, CCTV footage, and testimonies from eyewitnesses. The incriminating evidence of Jalen Watson's role untangled the initial knot in this complex system. DNA tests on the bright pink sweater proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Watson was irrefutably connected to the location of the crime. However, this discovery only set off a series of subsequent breakthroughs. According to authorities who dug into Watson's convoluted background, they found a glaring link. On that fateful morning, his phone records, a holdover from a previous parole period for burglary, located him precisely near the Blackburn home. Digital traces left by Deanna Gordon quickly became entangled. Her cell data painted a damning picture of her local presence and her closeness to the Chase Bank, where the heartless exploitation of Amanda's debit card occurred. To the third suspect, Larry Taylor was identified by the observant eyes of CCTV cameras. The last piece of this spooky jigsaw remained a mystery. His every step in the days after the disaster was painstakingly recorded and tracked to a certain residence. An actual revelation came to light as the trio's neck was coiled around the noose. A gun had been found, abandoned, close to the Blackburn residence. The crime lab technicians painstakingly analyzed it, and their findings exposed its lethal purpose, a silent witness to the depravity that had transpired within those walls. The hammer of justice was finally dropped after 2 exhausting weeks of inquiry and detective work. The cold-blooded murder of Amanda Blackburn was charged with 21-year-old Jalen Watson and 18-year-old Larry Taylor. The most serious charges were dropped against 24-year-old Deanna Gordon, who was only involved peripherally in the burglary spree and never entered the Blackburn property. However, the terror that Amanda went through in her dying moments was brought to light by Larry Taylor's eerie confession. His remarks, betraying his heartless indifference, described how he shot her twice. In her desperate defense, he pounded her to the floor. As she lay still on the floor, he crouched over her shattered body. He shot the last executioner's bullet into the back of her skull, all the while staring in sick fascination as her blood dripped onto the floor. The unfolding dark story provided a more distinct image, a trio of criminals motivated by avarice, with their eyes fixed on the Blackburn residence and the allure of a quick getaway. Because Davy forgot to lock the front door, they were able to sneak inside and face Amanda in an effort to defuse her meddling. The horrific attack by Taylor began when Watson and Gordon ran away to cash in on their stolen ATM gains. Upon recovering consciousness following the initial attack, Amanda gathered the strength to resist, desperately trying to thwart her attacker by lunging at him. However, her refusal to comply was met with icy brutality. She was murdered in the most horrific way imaginable. Then, while waiting for his companions to come back, Taylor collected the stolen debit cards in a collected manner. Amanda was doomed the moment their ATM withdrawal went through. It set the stage for their ultimate demise at the hands of a steadfast legal system. A night of unchecked lawlessness culminated in the path of depravity that investigators followed to the Blackburn home. Court records show that Gordon, Watson, and Taylor all went on a spree, with Amanda's house being the third target. The first attack occurred in the dead of night. While the inhabitants slept, a laptop, wallet, and automobile were stolen from them. The heartless robbers continued on their way, unfazed by the icy stare of the surveillance camera. After their first accomplishment, the 3 of them swooped down on the next target and carelessly smashed through a patio window. They were much more voracious this time, taking a laptop for TVs, jewelry, and even a bunch of oranges in their voracious appetite. Their doom was sealed nevertheless by the gaudy pink sweater that had been stolen in the same crime. Each piece of evidence painted a different picture of their downfall, and the affidavit laid out a terrible portrait. Even the sweater that Watson wore to hide his identity from the ATM surveillance camera, while he tried to withdraw money from Amanda's account, bore the incriminating DNA of the male. As their sentences drew near, Watson and Gordon decided to speak the truth in exchange for the prospect of lesser punishments. The most incriminating evidence, however, came from Larry Taylor himself. He admitted to being in the Blackburn neighborhood, but his statements were shrouded in doubt and gave no vindicating proof. In his written allegations, the county prosecutor spared no room for confusion. A horrific number of charges were leveled against Larry Taylor, the most severe of them being the intentional termination of Amanda Blackburn. The seriousness of the burglary, robbery, and theft accusations against him and his accomplices, Watson and Gordon revealed the breadth and depth of their wrongdoing. The authorities spared no effort in their pursuit of 3 perpetrators. At the same time, a 4th lingered on the edge, mindful of the atrocities but not personally involved. Federal marshals, the Violent Crimes Unit, the gang unit and other special elements of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department worked together relentlessly to reveal the truth. Chief Rick Height enthusiastically admired the collaboration between agencies that resulted in the arrests, highlighting the police officers' unfaltering commitment. With the unwavering backing of Assistant U.S. Attorney Josh Minkler and Prosecutor Terry Curry, detectives worked harder, sacrificing their sleep in their pursuit of a result. Ultimately, justice was done, but not before the devastating truth came to light. Amanda's pregnancy, a life cruelly cut short before it had even started. Even though they could not be charged with rape due to the horrible nature of her attack, the death of her unborn child was a constant reminder of how terrible human beings can be. The wheels of justice came to a halt in December 2021 when Larry Taylor's first trial elapsed seconds after it began. Amid the astonished calm, an appeal was declared due to a juror's careless disclosure of case data, which violated holy etiquette. However, this was just a temporary obstacle on the circuitous path to a settlement. When the last trial began in October 2022, every possible measure was taken to ensure that the jury was fair. A comprehensive 16-page questionnaire was administered to each of the 100 prospective arbitrators to gauge their capacity to deliver an impartial, bias-free decision. The proof was devastating in the end for the cold-blooded murder of Amanda Blackburn and the burglary charges that accompanied it. Larry Joe Taylor received an 86-year sentence in the merciless confines of the Indiana State Correctional Institution. His destiny was sealed. While he was avoiding justice, his accomplices Jalen Watson and Diana Gordon had chosen a different approach, negotiating plea deals that lowered their sentences to 25 to 35 years in prison in return for their testimony against Taylor. However, justice had not yet been fully executed. Judges moved to harshly increase Taylor's sentence after learning that Amanda was carrying her unborn child at the time of her terrible murder. As a sobering reminder of his wickedness, his punishment might be extended by another 20 years. Davy Blackburn, who had vowed to love and cherish Amanda, took comfort in the fact that her murderers were punished and could no longer wreak havoc on helpless victims. Proclaiming with words burdened by incalculable suffering, "I am relieved that those responsible for killing my wife have been caught," he declared. Governor Mike Pence, who was among more than 2,000 condolences at Amanda's funeral, is just one example of how the news of her passing has reached people all around the country. Amanda lived in a once idyllic town. Financial aid was also generously offered. The church set up a fundraising website to help with burial and hospital costs. In the middle of tragedy and legal processes, Davy held fast to a deep conviction and forgiveness, which shone like a light in the dark. "Although everything inside me wants to hate, be angry, and despair, I choose the path of forgiveness, grace, and hope," he told reporters. His words are tribute to the strength of the human spirit. In the wake of the case's widespread media coverage, Davy went from being a grieving husband to a famous public personality, a podcaster and blogger who made money out of his misfortune with the Nothing Wasted series. His heartbreaking account of Amanda's death and his anguish inspired people all around the world. But rumors of suspicion started flying as Davy's reputation and fortune increased, helped along by the insurance payment when his wife died. Curious eyes were drawn when, in March 2016, just months after the terrible event, he purchased a beautiful 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom property with a pool. Adding fire to the already simmering suspicion was the later sale of the house where Amanda had been killed. Davy appeared surprisingly content by July 2016, despite being an unhappy husband who had lost his beloved. This begs the disturbing question: had he really unintentionally forgotten to lock that door on November 10, 2015, or was there an ulterior motive hiding behind his public identity? A monument to his purported happiness. Unveiled via the lens of his blog, Davy's beautiful new house with a sparkling pool stood in stark contrast to the terror that had formerly consumed his world. As the constant murmurs of skepticism persisted, he cried, "Unexpected luck," his words creating a disruptive symphony. One pressing concern remained when he established a second marriage. Story 8. On December 15, 1954, within the walls of Holloway Prison in England, the gallows awaited Stilla Christofi, a 54-year-old woman sentenced to death for the murder of her daughter-in-law. Christofi was among the last women to face execution in the United Kingdom, making her one of the oldest to be condemned there. The protagonist of this grim tale, Stilla Christofi, was born in 1900 in a rural village in northern Cyprus, then a British protectorate. Raised in a family stricken by poverty, she was deprived of education, never learning to read or write. In her time, Christofi lived in a village where the law of the jungle prevailed over formal law. The strong crushed the weak and dominated the village's power dynamics. Growing up in such a milieu, Christofi naturally evolved into a fiercely independent and stubborn woman, always imposing her views on others. As she reached marriageable age, her parents, destitute themselves, arranged for her to marry a man from a coastal village, the poorest man in town. Her husband's sole income derived from his family's modest olive grove. The family toiled in the grove, barely scraping by. Eventually, Christofi bore a son named Stavros and took on the arduous task of caring for her husband's son and her mother-in-law, Maria. Christofi's relationship with her mother-in-law, Maria, was fraught with tension. In the matriarchal society of rural Cyprus, where women typically held supreme authority within the family, Maria was an exceptionally stubborn and selfish woman, constantly making life difficult for Christofi. In other households, daughters-in-law might unconditionally obey their mothers-in-law, but Christofi found it impossible to submit to hers. Although uneducated, Stylo Christofi was a shrewd and decisive woman. If she disagreed with her mother-in-law Maria's behavior, she would not suffer in silence, but would immediately retaliate. This led to endless arguments between Christofi and Maria, with the family often holding its breath as they watched these two formidable women clash. Over time, the rift between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law deepened. On September 29, 1924, at the age of 24, Christofi had a fierce argument with Maria. That evening, fueled by rage, Christofi lost control and decided to take drastic action against her unsuspecting mother-in-law. She conspired with two other women to carry out the deed and was promptly arrested by the police for the murder of Maria and brought to trial. However, Christofi was acquitted and released. At the time, she had been struggling to assert her authority over Maria in the household. One day, she stumbled upon a secret concerning the mysterious death of her father-in-law, which until then had remained unsolved. It turned out that Maria had orchestrated a plot back in 1911, where she and her lover had secretly killed her husband, staging his death as an accident to convince the family it was merely a tragic mishap. Upon discovering the truth, Christofi covertly informed her relatives about the secret of her father-in-law's death, urging that the family should seek justice for him and disregard Maria. In Cypriot society at that time, family honor was paramount. If a family member's behavior was socially unacceptable, the community might overlook the law to protect the family's honor. Maria's act of conspiring with her lover to kill her husband was an unforgivable crime that stained the family's honor. Persuaded by Christofi, the family agreed that Maria needed to be punished for tarnishing the family's reputation. Ultimately, on September 29, 1924, Christofi, with the aid of two neighborhood women, saw to it that Maria was made to pay for her crimes. As expected, the Cypriot court regarded Christofi's act of killing her mother-in-law as justified. Christofi was acquitted and released immediately after the trial. Shocked by the events, Christofi's husband abandoned her, leaving her to raise their son, Stavros, alone, thus necessitating her to become even more resilient. As time passed, teenage Stavros grew restless in a rural village setting. Like many young men of his generation, he yearned for the city life, despite his mother's objections. He moved to the city to seek work, becoming a waiter to save money, even amid the upheavals of World War II. During the late 1930s and early 1940s, many young Cypriots migrated to London, a transition made smoother by Cyprus being a British protectorate. Hence, the cultural shift felt less pronounced to them. In 1941, Stavros relocated to London, arriving with all his earnings from his city waitering job. There, he took up physically demanding labor, before securing a position as a waiter at the Café de Paris, a nightclub located in the West End near Leicester Square, on Coventry Street, Piccadilly. With his olive-hued eyes and a warm smile, Stavros was quite charming. He worked at this upscale London club, where he met many attractive women. Among them was Hella Bleicher, a German model, who had migrated to England before the outbreak of World War II. Stavros fell in love with Hella, a fellow expatriate. She reciprocated his feelings, and soon they began a romantic relationship. The couple married in 1942, to the admiration of all. Not long after, the young couple had 3 children. Following their marriage, they gradually built up their finances. Stavros continued to work at the Café de Paris, mingling with celebrities, while Hella took up a job at a fashion boutique. By 1953, Stavros and Hella had purchased a new home and decided to settle permanently in London. They worked hard and enjoyed spending time with their children in their new, luxurious home after hours. Their family appeared immensely happy, but alas, this happiness was short-lived. While Stavros was enjoying his days of happiness in the United Kingdom, his mother, Christophe, remained isolated in Cyprus. It had been 12 years since Stavros moved to England, and he had not once returned home. Additionally, Christophe was discontented that her son had married a foreigner, rather than a Cypriot woman, and she was infuriated at being excluded from the wedding. One day, Christophe received a letter from her son in distant England. Stavros had written to invite her to visit him and her grandchildren in the United Kingdom. Grateful for the contact from her son, she decided to make the challenging journey to visit her son and grandchildren, despite never having left Cyprus in her life. In 1953, Christophe finally left her homeland to visit the United Kingdom for the first time and reunite in London with her son Stavros, daughter-in-law Hella, and her 3 grandchildren after 12 years of rural life. The dazzling lights and grand scenery of London overwhelmed her, and she was shocked by the lifestyle of her son and daughter-in-law, which was completely different from that in their native Cyprus. Her grandchildren spoke English at home and lived entirely as Britons, while her daughter-in-law Hella, who followed a different religion and was a foreigner, did not speak Greek, Christophe's mother tongue. With her previously domineering nature, Christophe decided to change everything in her son's household. She insisted that her son and grandchildren adhere to Cypriot traditions and at least speak Greek at home. Christophe meddled in household affairs, child-rearing, and Hella's cooking. Hella patiently waited for the day her mother-in-law would return to Cyprus, hoping for a return to normalcy. But when Christophe abruptly declared she would not go back to Cyprus, Hella was plunged into despair. The home of Stavros and Hella was no longer a place of happiness due to the mother-in-law's presence. Their once peaceful household had become a ticking time bomb of tension. Hella fell into depression under the oppressive demands of her mother-in-law Christophe. Throughout the year, she spent time outside the home with her children on weekends and after work to avoid her mother-in-law. In July 1954, Hella and her husband Stavros asked Christophe to return to Cyprus, but she seemed reluctant to leave. Eventually, Hella told her husband that she would go to Germany with the children under the pretext of visiting family there. She informed him that they would leave for Germany on August 12, 1954. Stavros promised to speak carefully with his mother about this once his wife and children were safely out of the country. Unfortunately, Christophe discovered that her daughter-in-law Hella intended to take the grandchildren to Germany, called Stavros, and angrily declared that no one could leave the house, especially not her grandchildren. Christophe concocted a plan to stay in England permanently with her son and grandchildren. The only solution that came to her mind was to eliminate Hella, an outsider who had disrupted her son's life. Christophe thought that even if Hella disappeared, she could still take care of the grandchildren herself, and the more she thought about it, the more she relished the idea of her daughter-in-law's disappearance from the family. On the evening of July 29, 1954, Stavros left for his shift at the Café de Paris at 8:00 p.m. After her husband went to work, Hella put the children to bed, tidied the house, and prepared for sleep herself. It was at this moment that Christophe stealthily approached her daughter-in-law from behind and attacked her. As Hella fell to the ground, Christophe swiftly removed her wedding ring and dragged her outside. She then set her on fire. A nearby neighbor witnessed Christophe igniting the fire, but mistakenly thought Hella was burning a mannequin, as Hella also ran a fashion boutique. Christophe was merely attempting to destroy her enemy, but contrary to her expectations, the flames escalated uncontrollably. Christophe screamed for help, prompting the neighbor to report the incident. Firefighters arrived at the scene and managed to extinguish the fire. Hella's body was found among the remains. The police immediately contacted Stavros and briefed him on the situation. Upon returning home at 3:30 a.m. and learning of his wife Hella's death at the scene, Stavros was overcome with grief. The police cautiously approached the shocked Stavros to take a statement from his mother. They questioned Christophe about the events. She appeared flustered by the police's inquiries and claimed ignorance, stating she had simply run outside and screamed upon seeing the fire. Sensing something amiss, the police promptly searched the house, confirming signs of a struggle and evidence of arson. They began to suspect Christophe, who was in the house at the time, as the prime suspect. An examination of the scene revealed that Hella had not died from the fire, but had been physically attacked. Additionally, Hella's wedding ring was found in Christopher's bedroom. Based on the neighbor's testimony of seeing Christopher burning something, the mother-in-law from Cyprus was identified as the main suspect and was arrested. On October 25, 1954, the trial of Stylo Christopher commenced. In court, her son Stavros testified about the strained relationship between Hella and his mother. He revealed that Hella had never removed her wedding ring during their 15 years of marriage and suggested his mother could have removed it. A psychiatrist who had examined Christopher while she was detained at Holloway Prison testified that she suffered from delusional disorder and had exhibited bouts of frenzied screaming at night. Christopher's defense argued that she committed the crime in a state of mental confusion and insisted she should be confined to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. Upon hearing this, Christopher asserted that despite being a poorly educated woman, she was not insane and was in sound mental condition. Her insistence on her mental normalcy proved detrimental during the trial. During the trial for the murder of her daughter-in-law, Christopher shockingly confessed to also killing her mother-in-law 30 years earlier, revealing a secret past. Her son Stavros was stunned to learn that his mother had killed not only his wife, but also his grandmother. 2 hours after the trial began, the court found Christopher guilty of murdering her daughter-in-law Hella out of jealousy over her youth and appearance and sentenced her to death. On November 29, 1954, Christopher appealed, but it was immediately dismissed and her death sentence was upheld. Following the trial, her son Stavros never visited his malevolent mother again and severed all contact with her. Christopher continued to write letters to her son expressing her longing, but he never responded. Enraged by her son's behavior, Christopher blamed him for her death sentence, showing no remorse or concern for anyone but herself. Shortly before her execution, Christopher became fearful and requested her son to petition the court on her behalf, but Stavros completely ignored her plea, stating he could never forgive her. Knowing that her son had abandoned her, Christopher resigned herself to her fate. On December 15, 1954, Christopher, who had murdered both her mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, was executed. She walked to the gallows at Holloway Prison with a resigned demeanor, ending her life in isolation as her son did not attend the execution. Surprisingly, before her execution, Christopher requested that a Greek Orthodox cross be hung on the wall of the execution chamber as her final wish, and the prison authorities granted this request. The cross remained there until the room was demolished in 1967. It is perplexing how a woman capable of such cold-blooded murder could find solace in religious faith, or rather how her actions could invoke disgust and highlight the monstrous chaos within her from her youth to her old age. This concludes the case of Stylo Christopher. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper, thank you for joining me here at Mr. Night Scared. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware, even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep, and until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.